Good evening. Oh, are we ready? Yeah. All right. Good evening and welcome to the September 13th regular meeting of the City of Arcata Planning Commission. This is a public meeting, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on any item, there are several ways. If you are on Zoom, you can raise your hand, and when the public comment period opens, you will be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you're on your phone, you can also join the meeting and comment. Press *9 when it's your turn to speak, and you'll be unmuted, and again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if you're in attendance, of course, you can approach the podium, and you 3 minutes again to speak. This meeting is now officially called to order. Director Loya, can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah, Commissioner Mayer.
Here.
Commissioner Barstow.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Tagney.
Here.
Vice Chair Davies.
Here.
Chair of State Elcock.
Here.
And then we have Commissioner Figueroa joining us via Zoom.
Present.
And at the staff's table, we have David Loya, Director of Community Development, Joe Matier, Senior Planner, and Dilo Freitas, Senior Planner. Is that all that we have for tonight? Okay. So, we will move on to oral communications. Oral communications is time for people to speak on matters that are not on the agenda. If you are here to discuss any of our agenda items, including the Gateway Plan, please hold your comments until that agenda item is being discussed. I will open the public comment on those items, and you can speak then. Okay. Do we have anyone that wants to speak on a matter that's not Gateway related? Please move forward.
Might be a fine line on this one, but just shut me down if it seems inappropriate. I just wanted to speak a bit on the joint. Excuse me, I just almost ran here, walked here. Okay, so start again. I wanted to speak a bit on the event, the joint study session with the Planning Commission. And is this a Gateway thing? It's a comment about the presentation that was done for the L Street couplet. And I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. I've said this before, but time goes by. The thing that was left out of that presentation that Todd did from GHD, he neglected to...
Chris, I'm sorry. It does sound like you're speaking on matters that are directly related to the Gateway area. We're going to have that on the agenda tonight. That would be an appropriate time to bring that up.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I wasn't real clear if that was joint study.
Good evening. I want to address the Coastal Commission, and we had a meeting on that last Thursday. It was also in the Lost Coast Outpost as far as comments from the city. I mean, it was kind of very interesting from the standpoint that Marin County was right before us and basically had a subject with cow poop and occupied the whole day's topic as far as the water quality that was being affected by that. And so when it came to our shot at it with Arcata, it was basically 10 minutes conversation at 5 o'clock. So it's a little bizarre from the standpoint of hundreds of people participated in that, and as far as when it came to Arcata, out of the whole population, only 2 people made public comments. So I don't know whether that was because nobody knew about it or what was going on, but that was the reality. I also would like to say that after reading the whole package, which was pretty complicated, our city went to a lot of work and effort on phase 1. Basically, the Coastal Commission approved that, which had to do with water quality and trying to get in compliance with that. I also noticed from their response that they were also the city was trying to improvements in the levees, and that sort of got shut down in that phase 1. And the city is basically coming back with basically $33,000 million in improvements and $5.5 million in levee improvements on phase 2. That's what they verbally said and also in writing. So The Coastal Commission seems to, from their standpoint, not be very supportive of the levee enhancement in the future, and basically it said you have 5 years to respond to what your plan is for sea level rise, and so that's basically what the city needs to do. I think there's a $100,000 grant, so hopefully in that grant those questions will be answered, and it's a pretty critical thing. You have basically, they're saying 30 years to come up with a plan, so I hope we're going to be taking that seriously, and it is related to any land parcels that you're approving on in the future, because that needs to be answered where that plant is, where that wastewater treatment plant is going to go. So anything that you're voting on in the near future really needs to wait until you get the answers from that report, and also environmental impact report. So hopefully you all read that. And if you have any questions, ask the Coastal Commission staff, because they're here in Arcata. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. First, I object to including everything related to the Gateway Plan as being on the second part, not included in this, because just about everything I say relates to the Gateway Plan in my whole life. That said, I'll try. What I'm interested in is the process in what I'm saying today. What I've been watching the seven of you, including Christian, since April. I've seen a lot of strength among all of you. I think every one of you contributes a great deal. What I see is that the group of you have perhaps 100 or 150 years of planning experience among you. Whatever three-person city council we have will not have anything close to your experience. While we know that the framework here is for you to be a recommending body, what I see as an observer is that they are looking to you for direction. I also feel that they're looking to you for a leadership role. In Los Gatos on June 30th, they passed a new general plan, and almost immediately citizens got together, got signatures, and it's on the ballot to be voted on. I don't want to see that happen here. When I talk about my efforts to not delay this, I know sometimes people think that I am delaying it. It's to prevent something like that from happening. I firmly believe that when it comes to a vote of the three-person city council, it has to be a 3-0 vote. I think that among you, any recommendations that you make need to be a 6-1 or 7-0. I think we can achieve that. Anything less than that, I think, is going to bring a lot of public outcry. I think that's all I have that's not specifically Gateway related. I do have a new portal on my website, arcata1.com. This one is for the City Council. There's also one for the Planning Commission. It's arcata1.com, planning-commission. My website has grown. I know it's gotten ponderous. This will be a portal that you can see things on your own. I don't think I can say anything else that's not Gateway related. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners and staff. My name is Joanne McGarry, and I attend as many of these meetings as I can, and I have for the last 3 years as I could, because the climate reality is, to me, one of the primary things we all should be first and foremost in our minds. I spoke up at the last City Council meeting because I had attended 3 years ago, as Gregory alluded to, the Coastal Commission, and they met here in Eureka 3 years ago. And it was a 3-day meeting, and on the agenda for the first day was the Indianola bypass, and the second day was Alderon Laird's presentation on sea level rise. And it was a little bit of a backwards agenda order, in my opinion, because after Alderon gave his presentation on sea level rise, the jaws dropped of so many of the coastal commissioners in terms of the 101 corridor and the reality of its need to be altered before it starts getting washed away by the ocean waves, etc., because of sea level rise. So I had asked the city council last week, and I asked you that I think in terms of our general plan, I'm trying to understand the general plan and how it relates to things paralleling with the gateway plan, but when it comes to the general plan, I'd like to see what's happening all throughout the city in terms of all these issues with climate change first and foremost in our minds. If that includes transportation, housing, whatever, it really needs to be looked at in that lens, in that kind of lens. So I would really suggest that instead of waiting for decisions to be made on general plan, that the Planning Commission and the City Council agree to have at least a sea level rise report to the public presentation made so that we can all see it, whether it's on Zoom or in person. So you can see it, you can hear it from the expert's point of view of what that expert thinks about what's the reality in the coming years with sea level rise and our climate reality. And doing that sooner as opposed to later before any kind of decisions are made on so many other issues of the general plan and other plans. So I just really want to emphasize that I think it's really important to me as a citizen of this community. I am just but a mere tenant, but it's really important to me that the climate reality in our community takes action aggressively on this issue. Aggressively. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Do we have anyone online? Oh, excuse me.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Glenn Colwell. I live in the Sunset area, Westwood Avenue. I'm not sure exactly. So the Westwood Court project is not being discussed tonight?
It's going to be continued.
Continued. Okay, so can I speak about it? Can I make a comment since it's not on the agenda, or is it on the agenda?
It is on the agenda.
Okay, so I shouldn't make a comment.
You can make a comment when we get to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
We do have a couple online. Go ahead, Anthony.
My comment is gateway, but really it's specific to public relations. One of the things that I've noticed that is kind of like a point before I make my point is that there have been some like disappointing semantics at some of these meetings with council members arguing amongst each other and the public. I've never seen a situation where public commenters are being argued with by city council people. I think that that's pretty disturbing. And I think that you guys are there to represent our opinions, a representation of the opinion that we share with you. You've made a promise to Arcata citizens, not the state of California or building domain. Is that I was really disappointed recently when a friend of mine said that they read in the West Coast Outpost that found that it said straw poll. Most people aren't going to know the difference between a straw poll and actual decision being made. I feel like that comment by David Loya was purposely misleading to curb public participation, and I think that David should actually resign for it. And that's my comment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Go ahead, Greg.
Hi, thank you for your service. I really appreciate you all being there. Just wanted to echo what Joanne said about putting sea level rise really in the forefront of virtually all planning, if it pertains. But, Alderon Laird really did do a nationally significant study of Humboldt Bay, which is going to be one of the most significant examples of sea level inundation in the United States, one of the quickest. And I also want to So that's one thing, put that first and foremost, really in all planning. It doesn't make sense for us not to at this point. The other point is that, and it really plays into the idea of sea level rise, but also quality of life. And I harp on this a lot, but I want to reiterate that we have to redesign Arcata with regard to traffic flow and availability of pavement to non-motorized transportation, to cyclists, wheelchairs, pedestrians, etc. And that we actually start to constrict the ability to drive, my ability to drive, I drive a but also increase opportunities for disabled people to get closer to where they need to go. That's another key point of this. So, and the rest of us who are able, if you want, for the lack of a better term, it's a terrible word, I'm sorry, but, can do quite well with restricted, not, disallowed, but restricted access to where and how we can drive, especially speed, and really make it safer and more pleasant to be in the city of Arcata. If we build out the projections right now in GPU in 10 to 20 years, and we don't do something about the traffic paradigm, then Arcata will become unlivable. It'll be extremely dangerous. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead, Jane.
Good evening. Nice to see you all. I wanted to simply back up what McGarry had to say. I think we understand her environmental interests. Well, I have them as well. And unfortunately, I didn't get to attend the Coastal Commission's hearing and his presentation. But I think we ought to ask him to come before the city and before the Planning Commission to discuss these issues so they can be taken into account with regard to the entire plan, as she said, for the city, not just the gateway. So I think it's a critical issue, and if we don't take climate change into account, we're going to regret it, and it should have something to do with building heights and locations. So thank you very much. Good luck tonight.
Thanks, Jane. That's the last commenter.
That was the last comment. Okay. All right, we are going to move on to the consent calendar. The only thing we've got on there are the Planning Commission meeting notes from August 4th and August 9th.
I'd like to pull both of those.
So go ahead. What's the reason?
I think there were some editing issues, which may have come about because it was a holiday weekend and people were editing fast.
Yeah, I can't really.
Sorry, editing issues.
Okay.
I just edited myself. I think that there might have been some fast editing going on the holiday or something. On the August 4th notes, we have adjournment listed before David Loya's comments, and we obviously don't do anything after we adjourn. So that would probably need to be.
So what's the correction exactly? This is the August 4th?
It might also help, as long as we're pulling it, to list the website where the draft engagement report is available on the city website, because from that alone, it's very difficult to find. On August 9th.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Mayor, I'm not seeing the edit that you're referring to.
Number 4, adjournment. It appears that there were comments from you listed before or after the adjournment, and obviously adjournment came later.
I see that now. The title, the heading adjournment happens in the wrong place.
I do stuff like that when I'm editing on a small screen. Oftentimes, I adjourn things before I start. And then on August 9th, there were likewise a couple of reversals. The approval of the Planning Commission minutes on page 6 of the packet came apparently after the vote. Same thing, it was a reversal of the order, but I'd also like to point out that under the business items, there was one item that was continued to a date certain, today's meeting, which did not appear on today's agenda. And so since it didn't, I think that we need to provide an opportunity for anyone who expected it to be there to at least make public comments. That was the land use element update. And I believe there was another revision under the public hearings for FIN DBA, and I'm not sure what DBA stands for. It said there were no public comments, but I believe that FIN, the applicant, a member of the public, did comment. And that would be on packet page 7, the top of page, it says 3B. Thank you.
So would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes from those 2 meetings with your corrections?
I could make that motion, yes. I'll move to approve the minutes with the corrections, but I'd prefer to see the corrections first before we have that motion. And I'm very happy to approve those minutes at a future meeting.
So how do we do that?
Yeah, we can do that. I'll coordinate with Commissioner Mayer offline to bring these back at a later date.
But
Thank you.
you don't need a motion or a second, right? Because it's coming back. So to be continued?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll let that go. So, so we will move on to our first public hearing. And I have to recuse myself. This is the Westwood Garden Apartments permit. I'm going to recuse myself because my husband did some work on this job, and I'm going to go in the back room. I'm going to let Scott Davies take over.
Under public hearings, our first item is going to be the Westwood Garden Apartment project on Westwood Court. Can we start off with a staff report?
Yes, good evening, commissioners and public members. My name is Joe Mateer, senior planner with the City of Arcata, and I am the assigned planner for this project. We did notice this project for tonight's meeting, and the staff report, our staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider continuing this item to September 27th, 2022, to a date specific, so that we can further prepare the findings and conditions of approval for this project. Some things came up, and we are not able to have a full, complete staff report at this time.
And do you anticipate being able to bring it back to our next meeting?
That's the goal of our staff.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're looking for a motion to postpone it, I'd be happy to do that, but are we going to do oral, public?
Yeah, I'd like to
Okay.
open it up to oral communications
Yeah,
first.
public comment, yeah.
If there's anybody in the public that wants to speak to this project, now's your moment.
My name's Glenn Caldwell. I live in the Sunset area, and we'll be seeing the impacts of this project. So there's a lot happening, and in this little part of town, Foster Avenue, Alliance Road. a lot is going on, right? Cal Poly just bought the property that the old folks home was going to use, as you know. The Craftsman's Mall has been bought by HSU. The city has no jurisdiction over either of those properties now. And now this project is also coming into play. My concern is the increase in housing units on that site. And it's not that I'm concerned about the housing units specifically. I'm concerned about the traffic impacts related to the population density now on this little intersection. On the way over here tonight, I come down Western Avenue, hit Foster, getting ready to make a turn. I almost get creamed at sunset by a person distracted driving. The other day in the morning, I went out to go to the lumberyard, and the traffic backup on Foster trying to get onto Alliance was 20 cars deep at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I think a lot of that is students, parents bringing students to school, but it's also HSU, Cal Poly kids. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what the solution here is, but adding 400 additional units to that project is a bit alarming. I understand the city of Arcata needs housing, and I totally get that. But the residents in that area are being already pretty severely impacted by traffic, and this is going to have another large impact. So I don't know if the project owner is proposing to include transit incentives. Back when the other project was before the council, the Craftsman's Mall, that developer, I believe, was giving transit passes to residents. I'm hoping that that's part of what you guys will ask this developer to do. And I'm going to be looking to see how many parking spaces, you know, per residents are going to be included, and just concerns about trying to keep Arcata, you know, livable and keep traffic from becoming super problematic. It's already a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Davis. I'm a current resident of the Westwood Garden Apartments, and so this would directly impact me, and I would like to get some more information. Right now, there's limited parking for the 60 units that are actually there. How are we going to have parking for the additional 100 units that I see that's in this this notice? I would like to see a plan of some sort, and like I said, I'm concerned about the parking issue and also the impact of the older residents that live there. You know, that apartment complex was owned by a gentleman that kept the rents low, and so there's a lot of long established people, and I'm afraid that that sense of community is going to be disrupted by having, I don't even know how many stories it's going to be peeking down into us. It has to be more than 1 or 2 stories high to fit in the area that was open space where a barbecue and playground equipment was and all that. And I just need to find out more information about what this is going to all entail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lori Waldorf. I'm a homeowner in the immediate neighborhood of Sunset. It's astounding to me that 42 more units can be added when we've got existing housing right now that I believe is full vacancy. The 42 more units to 102. How many more cars? How much more noise? How much more impact? Why aren't there some options for 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, make it diverse? Is this more student housing off the campus, off of Cal Poly's ownership? What's your guess? It sounds to me like it might be cookie cutters, all one bedroom, 102 units, exactly alike, very, very small. I'd like to know what elements beautify this construction when they're talking about pulling down 49 existing trees. 26 of them are over 16 inches diameter. What is the parking to unit design? Is there any encouragement for public transit? Any incentives for public transit? This would, in all reality, force 42 more cars pouring onto Alliance. Where is it going to go? Where? It is, I've got to go back to my original point. It is astounding to me as a homeowner immediately in the area that something existing that has worked for years and years is going to be torn down and replaced with cookie cutter. This is not what I bought into. And my partner and I are pay a lot of taxes and have appreciated, came back to Arcata after 30 years working, and I'm highly concerned about what our immediate neighborhood is turning into. It's got to be livable for all, not for some certain developers. This is a neighborhood with families and elderly people, barbecues, the play yard. Where is that going to go? All the trees cut. Please think about this. On every level, it is highly offensive, and it feels very illegal to me. So please, please consider this carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not going to speak on the merits of the plan. We don't have the plans in front of us, nor am I going to speak about the quantities. I think some of the other speakers have spoken eloquently about that. Two things. As the previous speaker mentioned, it's a homogeneous building. It's 102 units, each 416 square feet. I am of the opinion that while this may be what the market wants, it's not necessarily good for Arcata. And I think we're going to find the same thing when we get to the gateway designs. I've seen this in other cities that I've looked at. The entire building is identical, 400 or even smaller, 300 square foot apartments. In terms of the delay for this session, Vice Chair Davies asked whether it would be here on September 27th. I think it would be nice to get a commitment or a better words as to why there would be a delay. I think it's just better for the public, for the process, to have a commitment to actually have it on September 27th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joanne McGarry, and I was coming here on my one-speed tricycle to try and not drive a car, because I really do think the future means fewer cars and more alternative ways for us to get around our town. But I actually happened upon a gentleman who was leaving City Hall, and I said, "Is there a meeting tonight?" And he said, "Oh yeah, but I was told by the senior planner that the issue I was going to speak on, which was the Stromberg properties, was going to be continued." So he left. So just in the casual conversation, I just want to share with you that there was a gentleman here who wanted to speak about this, but was under the impression that it wasn't going to be talked about, or there wasn't going to be public comment. And he basically said, it looks like they're trying to create dorms with a bathroom. And if we gather so many people in high density, it's like rats. And what happens with rats is that they kill each other. And then I made a comment about, and sometimes they kill themselves because of the situation of the lack of livability in design of very tight, small cookie cutter type places. So I'm sharing a little bit of my input along with what he had come to apparently speak about, but he is not here to speak, and I don't even know his name, but I just want to know that there was a person who wanted to speak on this, but was under the impression it wasn't going to be talked about. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll keep this really brief. I was just hearing everybody talk, and with this new added infill in that area, I might ask you guys to consider Q Street as a way of funneling some of the people out from that development, new development. There's also going to be the development that Cal Poly eventually, I am assuming, will put housing on that they took away from Life Plan Humboldt. It's going to be in that same area. It looks like, appears there'll be housing. So Q Street, I think, is a good option to bring some of those people, if they're not going towards their university or towards town, to bring some of those people out onto Samoa. I know it's built up as a roadway now, so it's under my impression that the wetlands would not be disturbed because they've already been disturbed because it's been built up. I know the trucks are using it to come off of Samoa now, to come around the soil science and into that area. So I just thought maybe going back to Q Street as a possibility to bring some of that traffic out. So thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I emailed you earlier today about the subject matter in a bigger sense, the SB 1000. So what you're seeing tonight with this issue is just a small glimpse into what's going to happen in the future of Arcata. So hopefully you read that email and look at the laws there regarding that, because this is a huge problem that I don't think anybody has an answer for, but it's going to affect probably everyone that lives in Sunset, Northtown, Central, and downtown Arcata. You know, it's the issue whether people understand it right now at this moment, because we're not seeing it, but it's going to be one of the biggest issues, and it's not something that's going to be a healthy thing for people living in the city. So it's a very difficult, issue to deal with, but it seems like how it's been handled with the plan that I've seen as far as the routes, it just kind of represents what's happened in the last 70 years, and it hasn't really addressed why they came up with environmental planning and social justice. This is kind of an example of why they came up with that law. So I think we need to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, and because it's going to be a mess. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a renter at Westwood Garden Apartments, and I didn't intend to speak. I'm nervous, but this is very disturbing to me. The inside part where they're going to cut all those trees, you need to go and look at the just experience the presence there. It is absolutely beautiful. I go back there and walk and be lots of times just to enjoy the nature. I can't imagine there's going to be 102 more apartments, and I've also heard that they're going to tear down our carports, so that means like where in the heck are we all going to park? And I know parking is an issue, but I'll be 80 this month, and I'm thinking, okay, they want everybody to walk, and I do walk, but that just seems totally unreasonable that you just push out everyone who needs a car. And that, but the main thing that's disturbing me also since they took over, my rent has gone up twice. My Social Security has not gone up any. It was $48 last month, and I just was informed that it's going to be $80 increase next month. But the other, not even above the cost of rent going up, which I know it's happening everywhere. It's the beauty that has been taken away from us, because there's so many people have gatherings of their families back there in that beautiful area, and where the children are going to play. So it just seems like just disregarding people's needs, and it's counting the money, counting the dollars. And I'm very disturbed about it, and I think it needs to be really looked at and considered a whole lot more before you go forward on this. And I'm disappointed that it didn't happen tonight like it was, you said that it would, and that we're going to have to wait for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any online commenters?
We do have a couple online. Go ahead, Raylina.
Hi, how's it going, everyone? Let me see if I can, I don't know if I can turn on my camera or not. I guess it doesn't matter too much, but I'm calling in from Westwood Garden Apartments. I'm a resident here, and I just wanted to, while we haven't seen any plans or actual details, just urge the Planning Commission, as we move into looking at this project itself, there are a lot of residents here that do represent a very good mix of students, of older folks, of families. And what I would like to see as a resident and community member here is a continuation of that diverse housing to encourage a thriving community and not just focus on one type of housing in particular. With everything that's being proposed, while it's still all in the planning phase, it would be very nice to see a rent freeze for our current residents. I don't know if that's something in the Planning Commission's jurisdiction necessarily, but from our standpoint, we've got less amenities and more hassle. And as the last commenter, my neighbor noted that, her Social Security isn't going up, even though rent is.
Rent has gone up 20%.
Rent has gone up 20% since Strombeck bought the property. They essentially have taken every legal point in increasing rent without increasing any amenities. But by and large, the biggest thing I'd like to bring to the council or the commission tonight, with respect that we haven't seen any details or plans, is that, how can we preserve the integrity of our community, not only with the people who live here, but also with the core values of our community. So I'd be really interested to see what kind of future forward technology could be in this plan, and as well as other models of ownership to continue that kind of diverse community here, with the emphasis to families, people who want to have roots here. And for me, that looks like condos potentially as other forms of ownership. But by and large, that is my comment. Thank you all. And I will just add, for any of my neighbors that are here, thank you for showing up to the meeting, and let's stay organized. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
Hi, yeah, thanks again. I've been through that little grove back there too, and I think part of your jurisdiction here and your responsibility is to protect, unique natural features which are disappearing by the day in Arcata. That's not my biggest concern, although it is a concern. The CEQA here is going to be interesting, especially with the state having bought now right behind there the 21 acres, and we know that whatever that is going to be a major development, and you're going to have no say over it. So you have to consider that. CEQA requires, of course, that you consider all past, present, and future projects in and around the project area, for environmental impact. And so taking these trees down, knowing about the development there, development in Gateway, development in a lot of places, you have to consider that. And I think for a project like this, there should be a full EIR. Once again, people speak to traffic. I just can't imagine these apartments going in there with nothing done about traffic in that area and throughout the city. So I want to reiterate that before these developments even get considered, the city must develop a master plan for traffic and how to diminish it. I really empathize with the woman who says it's unreasonable to push out people who need a car. And that's so true. I need a car sometimes. My work takes me all over the place. And so I drive a fair amount, much more than I'd like. But we have to find a way to incentivize non-motorized transportation and in ways to penalize motorized transportation that doesn't need to happen. And so that's why a master plan is important. We get together and as intelligent human beings, ostensibly, we figure these things out. You know that Strombeck has jumped this rent by 20% already is not a good sign. The sharks, the economic sharks that we know about, the national organizations, the corporations that like to own rentals, are looking to our area. We know that. They're looking all over the country. Since the pandemic, corporate ownership of rentals in the United States has gone from 30% to almost 50%. That's what we're looking at here. It's your job as public servants to protect us from these developments, from excessive dangerous traffic and from excessive dangerous corporate sharks that are targeting Humboldt County. They live here, but a lot of them are from outside the area, and you have to protect us from these developments. And that's what I'll say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. I am a person that just moved to the Garden Apartments, and I love living here. This is a beautiful spot, and I've lived here for about a month. So I'm living with a friend that has lived here for 16 years, and he's always loved living here too. It's beautiful. It's got a nice family environment. People here kind of know each other, and the courtyard is an area where we all meet and talk, and the children get to play. And my concern is adding all of these buildings to this 5-acre piece of property is going to disrupt our environment here and up our rents, like has been mentioned before. My other concern is the environmental impact it will have on the birds and the wetlands around here. And I would just like you all to please consider this aspect of it too, not just the financial, but the quality of life people are living here and the quality of life for the animal species and plant species around. And thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Turtle.
Hi, so I'm a resident here. I've been a college student here for the past 2.5 years. And when I first started living here, the rent was pretty cheap for me and my roommate. And since then it has gone up, which I really don't appreciate, especially because the note that we previously got was more to destroy the land in our background and to continue deforestation for the trees around us, which is completely not acceptable for me as an environmental science major. I just don't fully agree with it, and also don't concur with the fact that they're raising my rent when they didn't even ask me if I fully agree with what they're doing, because I don't. And they have raised our rent, I think, 20%. And I can't even afford it now, so I'm gonna have to struggle to live in this apartment when apartments are going to be built in our background, and then there's going to be a parking lot that's going to be built in our front yard. And I'm just I'm trying to get a degree, and everyone's trying to tell us to get a degree to get a better paying job, but also no people realize how that's going to affect me. And I'm not fully accepting of that yet. I may be all over the place right now. I'm sorry. This isn't the first time that I've had to do this. Just also as an Indigenous person, I'm not a person who agrees with the environmental destruction around places. I just hope that you guys really take this into consideration and just listen to people and don't approve of this, because here people are like actually struggling with the gentrification and everything that's happening. I just hope that you guys don't agree with this. Just please listen to the people who are already tenants here. And I've like listened so far this time, and there's been people who don't agree. So just I just hope that you guys are against it just as much as I am. But I don't know. Just as a college student though, I'm please be against. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turtle. Go ahead, Jesus.
Hi, good afternoon, City Council. My name is Jesus Flores, and I'm here with my fiance Vivian Alvarado. We're both tenants here at Westwood Garden Apartments. Just like to read what I wrote on this matter. So I think that housing is a concern in the community, but the new development should not be built at the expense of current tenants and the lack of updates and upgrades of current housing situations. Our apartments have, as we were told by our past owner, were from the 60s, and we live in a unit that's still finished and still has all the stuff from the 1960s, and nothing has really been upgraded. It's just kind of been maintained. And our concern is that with these new studio or one-bedroom apartment developments, they're going to be huge and a big disruption to this complex. The space at Westwood Garden Apartments already feels enclosed by its location, and I think that doubling that size by almost half, 102 units, is a big concern for such a big project. Personally, I've lived in this community for 11 years and have established myself well in this community as an educator and working in public police agencies. Westwood, from the care of its previous owner, has been a complex that seems more fit for families and long-term care residents, or long-term residents, sorry. Its landscape is something to be proud of. With the recent purchase from Strombeck, the noise has increased from younger college students. It's kind of attracted college students altogether, and the rent has increased already by as many have already said, 20%. Building a big complex that contrasts this well-established community will continue to affect those of us who have, established ourselves here now for some time. Affordability and comfortability, as I come to realize, is not synonymous with Strombeck, and I fear that with this new housing development, the interests of current residents will fall wayside, as it has been apparent with the increases of almost 20% of rent. I failed to see how this complex can support such a large expansion. I would like to voice my opinion against the development in hopes that the City Council can look forward to the interests of its citizens and our housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jane.
Good evening again. I absolutely know zip about this project, so I'll tell you that up front. But it just raised the issue for me is whether if this is multifamily housing and considered such, is it subject to the new bonus density law? And how would that apply? And secondly, it seems that most people haven't seen this plan, so they're trying to react to something they haven't seen, or that's what it sounds like. So I find it unfortunate that we are having something on the agenda without something to look at. So that's all my comment is. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There are no more commenters. Vice Chair, there is one hand that's come back up that already spoke, and so to folks who are interested in speaking a second time, typically we allow one opportunity. So it's to the Vice Chair whether you want to go through another round.
I think we'll stick where we are. We've got a lot on the agenda this evening. I did want to ask, when it comes back to us, hopefully at our next meeting, presumably we'll have a more in-depth staff report and an opportunity to answer some of the questions that were raised this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. The agenda item was placed tonight, anticipating that we would have a full packet for you, a full discussion, and an opportunity to, consider approval and conditions. And there were really some late developments after the agenda was noticed, after the public notice went out, that caused us to have to pull this from discussion tonight. And so, again, just to be real clear with the public, we are asking the Planning Commission to continue this to your next hearing, date certain, September 27th. So your very next meeting, when people will be able to see the full plan sets, the entire package, the environmental determinations, and addressing most of the issues that were raised by the public tonight.
And there'll be another opportunity for public comment as we go through it again, for everyone to
Absolutely.
just keep in mind. Do we need a motion since we're being continued?
Yeah, full motion, second, and a vote to continue to the 27th would be recommended.
I would like to make a motion that we continue this item to September 27th.
We have a first. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 This item is continued to the 27th.
Thank you. And for those in the public who are interested in speaking on the project, feel free to come back or attend again on Zoom at our next meeting. And if you have questions about the project specifically, you can reach out to Senior Planner Joe Mateer on those questions.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next public hearing, the Nosinger, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, design review merger at 113 13th Street in Arcata. Do we have a staff report on that?
We do. We do. Okay. I'm going to try and keep this pretty brief, and we'll take it wherever the commission would like to take it. First things first, this is the Nosinger Project as titled, but there are two property owners, two applicants. They're both here in the audience with us tonight, both Andrew Nosinger and Jenny Scheinman. The property is on 13th Street, 113 13th Street in the Bayview Neighborhood Conservation Area, just south of Cal Poly and east of Highway 101. So this project actually has been in the works for several months, and I'm very pleased to have it here before you this evening. They reached out shortly after purchasing the property in the summer of last year, and they were interested in a residential addition, which is before you tonight, but also ultimately ended up with a merger application as well, based on some of the conditions of the site, which we will go over. So a little bit of additional background on the merger component. This site was determined to be two legal parcels that were created prior to the Subdivision Map Act, and the addition as proposed would increase a non-conforming setback situation between the two parcels by bringing the addition, which will be to the west, on the west side of the primary structure, to about 3 feet of the existing garage. I also wanted to note that although the site is in the Bayview Neighborhood Conservation Area, which has sort of a higher threshold for architectural review, irrespective of whether or not the property is considered historic or potentially historic, this site did go to the Historic Landmarks Committee. They did have a discussion about it and determined it to not be a potentially significant resource. And if the commission has questions, I will probably turn it over to David, because I was not there for that evening's discussion. So the proposed addition is in blue, and it also, if you want to see a more legible picture, is on packet page 23. That's the site plan. It'll be a 2-story addition, pretty large addition, constituting 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a laundry room to meet the needs of the household. And I'm just going to run through the elevations really quickly. These are also in your packet. On the top left is the front elevation. This is what faces 13th Street. This is what it will look like if you're facing it from the road. And on the bottom there is the east-facing elevation, so that's what it would look like if you were coming from the community forest headed west. And then on the top is the rear elevation. This would not be visible from the street, but from the backyard. And then the west facing elevation on the bottom there, which would be if you were walking along 13th towards the community forest. And I wanted to also include a couple of current site photos that kind of provide a little bit more detail on the various setbacks of the existing structure and the proposed as well. I outlined in yellow here the current and proposed setbacks, which include the addition, and you'll notice they're all slightly different, and that is relevant partially with the findings that we're proposing you make tonight. Specifically, the fact that the addition as proposed is complementary but differentiated. The setback allows the massing to not be as significant from the street. They've done a good job complementing the existing sort of historic feel and surrounding neighboring structures in the opinion of staff. And for those reasons, we are recommending approval of this project. I also did want to note that there was an error in the staff report, specifically 2 of the findings for the design review, and I apologize for that confusion for the commission and for the applicant as well. I did send that out earlier today, and I will go through it in a moment as well, verbatim, so that the public can see those changes. But before that, we are also just going to note that the project is not only design review, but also approval of a merger of the 2 parcels for the reasons that I discussed earlier. The merger would merge these 2 lots into one to reduce that nonconformity of the setback, and the resultant parcel size would be about 13,000 square feet. So I'm going to run through these 2 proposed modifications to the draft findings placed before the commission tonight. And this is findings 5 and 6. So the first one is for consistency with the general plan and other applicable plans. And so the updated language will read, the site is not located within the coastal zone and does not fall within a specific plan area. No changes in use are proposed as a result of this project. And apologies, I know, David, you hate it when we read right off the slides, but just for full disclosure for the public, I'm going to read this really quickly here. The proposed use is allowed within the applicable zoning district and complies with all other applicable provisions of this land use code and the municipal code. The lot is located in the residential low-density zone district. The site's use will remain as a single-family dwelling, which is a principally permitted use in the RL zone. The proposed use remains consistent with the intent of the general plan, and therefore this project is deemed consistent with applicable plans. And finally, the finding regarding compliance with applicable design guidelines. The site complies with general plan design element policy, specifically design policy D-5B and historical preservation element policies H-4C and 4E by ensuring architectural style consistency and harmony between surrounding structures, and by ensuring the addition is proportional to the site and surroundings. The chosen placement of the addition design does not block solar access and minimizes disturbances to natural site conditions. The overall design balances meeting the needs of current owners with conserving the architectural style of the surrounding Bayview neighborhood conservation area. And finally, the project as designed does not destroy the architectural character of the property or surrounding neighborhood conservation area. So thank you for bearing with me through that. So finally, before I'll turn it over to the commission, staff's recommendation is to approve this project as proposed, both the design review permit and the parcel merger, by adopting Class 1 and Class 5 CEQA exemptions, and as a separate action, adopting the findings of approval with these suggested modifications that I just ran you through, which is Exhibit 1, and the conditions of approval in the report, which are included as Exhibit 2. If you have any questions, I would be happy to try and answer those for you.
Judith?
Yeah, when I was looking at the site plan, the first thing that came to mind was, why didn't they just do a lot line adjustment rather than a merger? Because then they would still have two parcels. And of course, we know that under the new rules, you can then subdivide those parcels. And then I looked at the fact that there was no way to do that without landlocked other parcel. So the question I want to ask is, I notice on the site plan that A Street next to the parcel was vacated. And I'm wondering what the status of that is, because with this merger, presumably if A Street was ever unvacated, then another subdivision wouldn't be landlocked. Is this merged parcel going to be subject to the possibility of further subdivision under the current rules? That's the question.
Yeah, I think the property could be subdivided again under current SB 9 regulations. We did suggest, retaining the parcel and doing a lot line adjustment to reconfigure, and the applicant is not interested in doing that. The vacated roadway, when the city vacates, those properties actually go to adjacent property owners, and so, theoretically, it's possible that in the future the city could buy that land back, but I think it's a pretty small possibility.
If I understand that the owners, current owners, aren't interested in doing that. I'm just sort of wondering if an owner were to develop a private roadway there on the former A Street, would that open up that rear part of the site to, okay, so, I mean, I realize that's kind of a long-term thing, but we're looking at lots of projects of that sort, so I'm wondering.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was something that was discussed with the applicants, sort of the pros and cons of trying to retain the two lots or merge into one. There are sort of pros and cons to SB 9 as well, but that was discussed as a way for them to reevaluate the conditions at a further time if they wanted to consider additional development on the site.
Are there any further clarifications before I open this to public hearing? Would the applicant or applicants like to, do you have anything that you'd like to add or explain? You don't have to, but no, you need to step up to the microphone, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful for people who might be watching online so they can hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilo, for going through all the details so clearly. It was good to see all that work laid out here. Yeah, I think, what we'd like to say is just, thank you for all the participants and contributors and commissioners for, participating in this community project. We were here witnessing all the previous conversations, and it's just admirable to be with everybody who is a part of this community and doing what needs to be done. I can maybe answer some questions, but I think Dilo pretty much went over what our plan is, and we're excited about it. I guess that's about it. Jenny, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think the plan is pretty clear. We have 2 children. I'm a musician. I teach music in the schools here, and I'm excited about having music in the house and having enough space for the kids to have their own room. And yeah, we're excited about being in the community. And this was kind of I think a relatively modest way of making the house more available to a family, to our family. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any member of the community who would like to make a comment on this project? Is there anyone online?
Not seeing anyone.
All right, so we will close the public comment portion of this meeting, and would any commissioners have any comments, or would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I like this project. I think it's sensible. I looked at it, drove by, walked around. I think it's been thoughtfully put together. I agree that it doesn't, impact negatively the community at all, and I think it's a good solution for creating more housing there without negatively impacting that community. So I'm enthusiastically for this project. Yeah, I would like to make a motion to approve.
We have a first from Davies. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Do you need us to clarify the changes to the conditions?
Duly noted.
Duly noted, as presented. Thank you.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? I forgot Christian was here. Okay. All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Congratulations to the applicants.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our business items, which is consider the Gateway Area Plan with emphasis on design and community benefit chapters. So we have a few things to talk about. I think the first thing we should probably talk about is is it okay if we talk about the task force or subcommittee or RGA or because it wasn't really on the agenda? Is it okay if is it legal for us to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The staff report that I had prepared does include the direction that came out of the study session with the City Council, where the Planning Commission was specifically, asked to follow up on recommendation for building height and topics related to that, and then also to weigh in on the types of additional resources the Planning Commission feels it needs to bring to its discussion in order to make a recommendation up to and including, recommendations from the community, for special committees or task forces. And so all of that is fair game. I did have one Planning Commissioner request that I present some of the material that was shown in the form-based code presentation that I put together at the beginning of August, and so I have that available if you're interested. If you want to cut straight to deliberations, I'm happy to take a step back and let that roll as well.
I think the first thing we should just talk about and get out of the way is the RGA proposal. We had a really great offer from this committee, willing to help and contribute towards developing our Gateway Area Plan. And we all had a study session with the City Council at our last meeting. And so I am interested on what we as a group, how we can you feel we can best utilize the RGA's contribution. So does anyone have anything to contribute?
Well, this is a big topic, and I know we've touched on it a number of times, or a few times, and we're very inconclusive in our joint study session with the City Council about it. What I heard from the larger group, including our commission, is some interest as long as it was directed. That's what I felt like I heard. And I'd like to hear back from others if that's not their interpretation. If there was a very specific task or number of tasks that were very specific, and we felt like an outside group would do well for staff and for us to gather information on that, specific list, then I could see it going forward. But without something that felt like a really intentional goal and agenda, it feels like that group would be basically replicating what I see this group doing and the public engagement that we solicit to come here. So to not be redundant, I would like to hear from others as to, how we see it supporting us and supporting staff.
So I was wanting to maybe see if there would be the potential priority issues, which there looked like there were 14 identified possible topics. So maybe we could go through and identify those particular issues so that we do have that direction and see if there is enough of these issues that we feel are going to be prioritized. Is that maybe a direction that we want to take?
I mean, I think there's a number of issues where we all could benefit from more expert opinion in some way. I think it seems to me that it's a question of whether we want to pause our current discussions around the Gateway program to bring a group in now, or whether my preference would be that we keep working through these chapters in this process now and not get into further delay, and that instead we perhaps take a twofold approach, which is that we utilize in the shorter term staff resources, experts that the city can bring in to speak to specific issues like form-based code from consultants that are already part of this process and have already been under contract with the city. That's something that we could do that wouldn't require us to hit the brakes on this process. And at the same time, perhaps we take the working group idea that RGA proposed and utilize working groups that would be targeted for specific issues, but use them to help inform our review process during the environmental impact report that is going to follow the Gateway process as part of it, because it would give more time for those groups to be pulled together. It would mean that we wouldn't have to pause the process that we're in now, and it would still allow for those groups to give feedback to the Planning Commission directly, not in parallel to the City Council, but specifically to the Planning Commission. And to me, that feels like a way that we can kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I essentially agree with what both Scott and Dan have mentioned. Looking back at the process by which the General Plan 2020 was developed, we had task forces involved in making recommendations for the general plan itself, and then later on we had a consultant who put together a proposal for the actual ordinances, the actual land use code, and then that came back. I was on the Design Review Commission, and we looked at the design and historic preservation parts of the code that the consultant had come up with, and basically found that it didn't fit Arcata. I have more confidence in the consultants we have now because they're more local, but that was done by somebody down in the Bay Area, and it looked like boilerplate from San Jose or someplace. Just did not work. So my thinking is that when we get to the point where, I'm assuming that we will have a proposed code assembled by a consultant. Is that right, David?
Yeah, the idea for the form-based code is that as we're going through the community design process with our consultant, they'll be pulling those ideas together into a formal draft plan that'll be circulated, separately.
So I'm thinking that when we get to the point where that code has been assembled and put forward, that we could use help from specialized task forces to look at the code, see how it works for our purposes, for Arcata, and make suggestions on how to improve it. Otherwise, at this point, I don't see any advantage to impaneling another group of people to do the same thing that is already being done.
I found some of the suggestions that the members of the RGA group have made to be extremely useful, including a recent proposal by Jane Woodward about how to go about thinking through the community benefits program. This was something that was just sent out this week for our packets. I'm distressed by suggestions that we should pull back on the process that we've already found ourselves in the midst of and considered addressing the gateway through something that's not an area plan that would be part of the general plan. And I know that at least initially that was an integral part of the group's proposal. And I'm hoping that we in the city council are no longer considering that, but have agreed to go ahead with the process that we're engaged in now. I think that when we come to the details of both the community benefits program and the design components, the more participation, the more insights we have, and the more expertise from people who have been deeply engaged in this type of form-based code planning would be really helpful. And I would love to hear some proposals for how a community-based design process would work, one that is not public relations or promotion by city staff or by consultants, but something that would engage in, civic discourse rather than a less nuanced kind of approach. And so that's something that I think that we can talk about over the coming weeks, I hope, to figure out what we'd like to expect. Certainly more help from the consultants that we've already engaged with regard to both design and the community benefits program is something that I would really appreciate. And I don't think it's something that we're going to be able to hammer out in 1 or 2 meetings or in response to a single draft that's put before us where we're asked to say yes or no. I would also note that in our previous meeting, I think there was an expectation that we would actually be talking about some more of the details of the community benefits program today at this meeting. And I know that some of us actually prepared materials hoping that that would happen. John's was part of our packet. I know that I wrote some out. I'd like to request that members of the commission actually write some of that material out so that it can be circulated as part of our packet for our next meeting, or if that agenda doesn't allow that to happen, for the subsequent meeting after that. it really, really helps to have materials written and in a way that we can compare rather than sort of throwing out comments verbally here. It makes sense that we do that homework and think through how that relates to the draft that staff has also put before us. So I'd propose that we go through some of that process in the coming weeks, that we support staff and the city council in efforts to get some more resources for expert consultants on both the codes and the community development program as well as design, and that we think of some very meaningful roles for the good ideas that members of the public would like to contribute to this process, and to do it systematically and to build that into our process, rather than, I think, what the inevitable alternative would be, which would be to confront those people with those excellent ideas as opponents of the plan. So I hope we can put our thinking caps on and have an opportunity to discuss both the process and the beginnings of how we want to address community benefits at our upcoming meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go back to that right now, but Christian, can I get your thoughts on the task force, please?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. It's ultimately, I feel kind of in the same breath as Vice Chair Davies and ultimately I feel that, we shouldn't pull back on what we've already deliberated on so far. We should just continue to proceed. However, with groups like Responsible Growth, Arcata, and others within our community that are interested in this process, to be able to participate, as things start to unfold in respects to giving us more input and greater community input in respects to, the development of to the development of the form-based codes, and also giving input on, whatever draft that is provided to us by our consultants, and also participating, and actually actively thinking in regards of, what is our benefits and what is our community benefit program, and actually get that really clearly delineated, so it, meets the needs of this plan and meets the needs of our community. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say for now.
So I agree. I don't think that it would be wise to pull back. I guess I was seeing this as working simultaneously, and I really liked the idea that with the form-based codes, because these committees that we currently have, they're working really hard. And we have a group who's willing to do some of that footwork for us and bring it to us. And one of those things would be to research examples of communities similar to Arcata that have implemented form-based codes and have looked at 3D models and possible building types like setback, solar, rooftop gardens, balconies, etc. And that they could also review and rank order these amenities associated with the form-based code, and then bring that back. And I also, consultants cost money, and of course we're going to use that, but if we can minimize that cost by utilizing some of the expert that we have, then that would be another way to eliminate some costs. I really like what Jane was talking about also, is to rank order these community benefits. So I guess I'm wanting to push forward And in my mind, the best of both worlds is to have this working behind the scenes simultaneously. We bring what we want to them. It's like, we need this, can you research this, bring it back to us. The community is asking this, we still haven't got any clarity, and they would bring that back to us. I see it as a time saver, not a stalling. I think, so that's what I just wanted to say. And then I also needed a clarification, because John had mentioned specialized task force, and I guess I was just needing, like, I just was wondering what you meant, because you were talking about, yes, that would be something good towards the end about specific things for, and I just wasn't sure, were you thinking of utilizing some of that expertise and just keep forging forward?
I was suggesting that would begin as soon as the actual code is created. And the idea being that we would have people from the community who have interest and knowledge in specific areas would go over those sections, relevant sections of the code, and see how it works. The challenge of creating this form-based code is that it needs to be sufficiently well-defined that when a project comes in, it can be approved ministerially, in other words, with no discretionary review. So the code is going to have to be quite specific in order to give the ministerial decision makers guidance and really certain guidance on whether the project meets the code. That also goes for the proposed community benefits or amenities. They need to be well defined so that basically, regardless of who reviews it on the city staff level, they'll come to the same conclusion because it will be so well defined. So anyway, I think all the time that we're spending now on the basic plan, I think might be much less than what's going to be needed when we develop the code itself, because we're really shooting for a result that I consider to be quite difficult to assure that we get what the community wants and what works for Arcata without requiring discretionary review.
I feel like we've drifted a little bit in our conversation. I think what we were really talking about was how we felt about the working group proposal, not the various different components of the gateway, whether it be community benefits or what have you. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for anyone in the community, expert or otherwise, interested or engaged on whatever level, to share their ideas about what they think would be important as far as community benefits. I think that we as a council can, as a planning commission rather, can take all of that input into our considerations. I know we read letters every week from the community. I think we can take stock of what we think are the most important components of the community benefits program, and then work with someone who is an expert in form-based code, not to make a sales pitch to us about it, but to say, these are the things that we think are most important. How do we turn this into a code that will make sure buildings and streetscapes reflect the things that we and the community are concerned about. That feels to me like the process we're on now, and one that I vote we continue along with. I'll say again, I think the concept of the working group does have some merit, but I think it would make more sense to bring working groups in during the environmental impact review process, which is also going to be part of our review. There's no way that we can continue on with an issue right now. If we put together a working group right now, what we're saying is we're going to essentially stop dealing with that issue until we hear a report from that group 8 weeks, 12 weeks, however many weeks down the road. I don't see why we would continue talking about the issue ahead of the opinion of a working group. And if we intend to, then why do we need the working group?
All right, so we have a tremendous amount of work we have to do. We have to get, like John said, we have to come up with the details. These are the things that are going to go into the code, our details. So we have a lot of work to do. So there is some things that this working group could do that we could benefit from. For example, I just came up with a few things. I would love to have a working group maybe come up with ideas on how to provide home ownership opportunities. We are stumped with that. Maybe by the time we get to that part of that chapter, maybe they will have some fantastic ideas. We could have them working on sea level rise. From what I hear, it's like 80 years and we're in big trouble, and it's going to take 20 years to develop property. So that's something that really they could be working on that. And then regarding what Judith was saying, that we were supposed to talk about community benefits and amenities. I'm sorry about that. Lots happened since that meeting, but I'm glad that we didn't get to that, because we got that great recommendation from Jane Woodard about a ranking system. I thought, oh, that's how we're going to do it. So I'm actually glad that I forgot that we were supposed to go over that tonight. So there are things that this working group could do. There are tasks that we know are down the road, maybe a few months from now, maybe 6 months from now. Let them start working on it. By the time we get there, they'll have it all maybe figured out or have some options for us. So, but it sounds like we don't all agree on what we want to do. So maybe this needs to come back at our next meeting, or maybe the vice chair and I need to work it out on our own. Help, what do we do? Yeah.
I have something to say.
Help. Yeah.
One thing that we should all keep in mind is that working groups are working. There's people in the, RGA is one of them. There's other groups that present, that send letters. We're all getting a lot of emails. And I invite that input. It's wonderful to be able to sit quietly and read through this stuff. If it doesn't fit into the 3-minute community input portion of the meeting, you can write a lot of stuff in an email with graphs and diagrams and charts or whatever you need. And we will receive it and we will read it and sometimes respond to it if we're not overwhelmed. But, in terms of parallel paths, and I'm partly responding to you, is that can be happening, and it is happening, and they can contribute to this process through this forum that's already in place. We can't restrict it or resist it. It's already happening. For us to formally acknowledge an advisory committee would take a separate discussion, because it's complicated. It wouldn't be RGA. Maybe they would have one representative, but it would be broadcast to the greater community who wants to apply for this. They'd have to get vetted through the city council. There would be a lot of staff time involved. We'd have to talk about staff interaction with this group. They would be accountable to the Brown Act and all kinds of stuff. I don't know where they would meet. And we would have to give them the assignments that we all agree on, or the council would, or some combination of, and staff. So there's a lot to it if we actually go down that path. Short of that, there's been some ideas that it could be helpful, but it doesn't sound like it's a right now need. I like, though, that, as you said, there's a couple of items that, if some group wanted to work on, but to create that group is a big deal. We all know that. It's a big deal.
So I just wanted to say, I know you said it was getting off track, and I just wanted to address what Dan had said, is that as long as there was interest and it was directed, so that's why I brought up, because they had outlined 14 different things that they could work on. And then I'm going to stop right after this, but I just want to point out that they got 82 signatures, and I'm sure they could have got a lot more. And these signatures, like, the vice chair of the concluded plaza improvement task. We have Kirk from the Greenway. We have Jackie from the Arcata Playhouse. We have Cal Poly Humboldt, the director or Department of Environmental Resources. We have Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. We have people from the Environmental Resource Engineering. We have both county and Arcata planning commissioners. We have business owners from the artists, executive director from Land Conservancy, more planning commissioners, safety, transportation. We have all kinds of these business owners, environmental engineers, and economic development. And that speaks to me. If all of these people feel this is important, it might be time well spent, and it would take a burden off of these committees who are giving their time for free. So that's my last thing to say about that. Thank you for enduring me.
I mean, I hear all that, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just thinking it might be more appropriate later down the road when we're in the EIR process, because there's more time for us to do, as Dan said, the complicated work to form these, identify the tasks, have these groups vetted, because that's further down the road. If we say, okay, we'll try this idea, we'll try it at this point in the process, there's enough roadway between here and then that we can keep working in the meantime and don't have to stop, change directions, and wait for these groups to do their work before we get to these pieces. So I don't think that it's necessarily categorically a bad idea. I just don't see how we can keep working in the short term if we decide to do this. There's going to be a lot of things that we have to essentially stop working on. Because we're saying we want their input before we make a decision. And so I think if we can utilize the opportunity to get feedback from the community, as Dan mentioned, that we have right now, whether it be experts or groups or individuals, that we draw on city staff, the consultants that they can make available to us, that it feels to me like there's a solution there that allows us to maintain a sense of progress with this. It feels like we're a little bit stalled out, and I would like to not slow further down now. And that's why I think being able to bring those groups in a little bit later down the road gives a chance for that feedback and that community voice, but keeps us more on the timeline that we currently have mapped out.
So do we want to table this for a future meeting when we've had more time to think about it? Yes? Okay, we're going to table this for a future meeting. We'll talk about it again at our next meeting.
Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could, just from the staff perspective, it would be great to have an action on this, at least some preliminary action on some of the items that the Planning Commission wants to see to support your decision, whether it's this particular RGA proposal or if there are some other, issues that have been of concern to you. You'd brought up personally the homeownership opportunity. What are we doing about that? Sea level rise, and one other topic that I have in my notes, all of which, we have some information on. We can also bring more experts to bear on those if the commission feels they need to hear about that before making decisions. And the reason I'm asking for you to start taking some actions is that we've delayed and deferred. This document came out in December of 21, and we've been having discussions on it since then, frankly, delaying and deferring decisions until some later date. And at some point, we need to start making some preliminary decisions to keep us moving forward. Most of what we're talking about here tonight in terms of support for the Planning Commission will require budget actions. We'll need to go to the City Council and ask them to, appropriate additional general fund revenues towards this effort in order to do this additional work, whether it's, committees or experts that you want to hear from. In addition, at the the study session, the council and the planning commission talked a lot about additional resources that come forward to support the form-based code. We would like to be able to start working on those things as soon as we possibly can. We have a scope of work that will encompass three additional workshops with the public on form-based code. And we will, at the end of that time, have used the entire budget for that work, and that will be the basis of our form-based code. 3 total meetings with the public, and then some resources that our experts at GHD are going to bring to the table for that. If the Planning Commission wants to see more effort and energy put into that, more community workshops, more community outreach, beyond that, we'd like to start getting that in place so that we could have, that ready to go as soon as we get through these 3 meetings. If there are, additional opportunities that we develop that, could bring more resources to that effort, we'd like to keep them moving forward. So if there's any way, I heard some, I'm hearing a consistent theme from where I sit. I would think that, I know it's a hard decision to make, to decide these various factors, but it sounds like to me that the Planning Commission does have the information it needs to make some decisions tonight, and I would encourage you to do so.
We're going to make some decisions tonight, but right now we just want to decide if we're going to utilize the task force or not. I feel like this needs to come back. We're wasting too much time on this. We need to come back with a proposal, those of us who want the task force, and then we will probably take a vote, I would think, at some point.
Can I just throw out that the task force as presented I was very challenged with. There was about who they report to and what their role would be. I would not vote for that. So if we want to go through that process, there's been one group that has presented one model of a task force. I would vote against it in a second right now if that would add clarity to this overall conversation. If another proposal comes along that is something that's reflecting a little bit more of what we're all saying might work, we haven't seen it yet. If a group wants to email us or come up with that proposal, maybe we can respond to that one next, and maybe it will be more refined. The last one was very, very vague and broad, way too broad for my taste.
We don't have to open this to public comment, do we?
I think it would be advisable to, at some point in this item, to take public comment, yes. But you don't have to take it after each specific topic that the Planning Commission takes up.
Okay,
And
so
you can take it either, at the beginning or at the end. It's up to you.
So what you're saying is you would vote for no task force based on their presentation.
Yes.
But we invite them to come back in with a better.
They or anybody else. Any ideas?
How do we feel about that? Because we really need to move on.
I agree with Dan.
Any way we can get it done, however we get it done. So if somebody wants to come back with a better proposal, that would work. So we would invite anyone, including the current proposal, to come back with another proposal.
Yeah, I would not support creating a task force right at this point.
I think we need to encourage a robust public participation process, invite the public into this process, but it needs to remain a planning commission process, and I think that we need to think of some creative ways of ensuring that the public is being heard and that we're responding to both their support and their criticism as we go forward drafting the plan and the code that would implement it. I also think it's really important to remember that the Gateway Plan addresses the future of one part of Arcata. We also need to update our general plan, and we finally need to adopt our local coastal program, which explicitly must address sea level rise and other aspects of climate change, possibly throughout the city, and that the Planning Commission needs to be central in all of that. And so to the extent that the public can organize to participate in that process, that's really helpful. To the extent that we need consultants to help the city write enforceable and enthusiastically supported code, we need that, and that's going to be expensive. And so, yeah, City Council, give us that.
Okay, thank you. And Christian?
I'm sorry, Judith, was that a yes or was that a no for the task force question? That was a no.
It was exactly what I said it was.
That's fine. Christian? Are you there?
I'm not in favor of having a task force that is running in parallel with us. I feel it's more opportune for them, for individuals within our community to engage themselves, either in public comment when we're participating presently, in these meetings, or, to email us, their ideas and their thoughts and so forth, and in which we can, deliberate on these items and try to come to the table with something that is, community focused and defendable. So yeah, that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you. So we don't need to formally vote on this, right? So we could just move on for now, and then we'll meet anyway. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, or I want us to talk about, is reconfiguring the districts, because we've got to get these districts worked out the way we all think they should be, so that we can start building within the, we talk about the height, then we can really start building the code. So I had some ideas. I had an idea. David, were you able to bring up what I had sent? No?
I don't remember.
Okay, I had some help. So my only problem with the districts, I actually think that Plan West did a good job anticipating what we might want, but my only problem was I think one of them is wrong. And I talked about it at the last meeting. I think the corridor needs to be broken in half. I don't think one end of the corridor has anything to do with the other end of the corridor. I think it needs to be broken in half, needs to be from 7th Street down to K Street to 11th and a half Street, down 11th, down in and 8th Street. And I had sent an email to you, David, that had it all marked out. Well, I sent it to him, but I don't think you got it. Were you able to get it? I emailed it to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair, I don't have that map. I'm trying to pull up a map of
Oh, okay. Fred actually made it for me because I am not computer literate.
I'm sorry. I can't.
You can't?
Insert a thumb drive into a city computer.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure it's totally fine, but we have
but if you could just bring up a map.
Can you tell us what page on the plan that district map is on?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a image of our current districts so you can have a map to look at.
Seeing that?
Thank you.
Oh, 44? There we go. Yeah, I had it marked too. So I think it needs to be divided here, and I think it needs to encompass the whole Creamery District. and the reason, my logic is because there's a lot of single-family homes right along there. The Devlin cottages are right there. The Creamery District is right there. I feel like that needs to be its own district, and the Creamery building needs to be the star of that show, and anything that gets built around there should be respectful of, they should be supporting actors, not the star. So I think that needs to be broken up, and otherwise, I really think that Plan West did a good job on the rest of the districts. But we need to decide if this is what we want so that we can start talking about building height, and then once we figure that out, and of course, no decision that we're going to make, by the way, is going to be written in stone. As we gather more information and we have experts come in, we will be able to change our minds. If more information comes in and we figure out that we can't, make things work the way we want, until everything gets sent to the city council, we can change our minds. But I am going to be asking you to make some decisions tonight based on the knowledge that we have on the districts, and then I'm going to ask you about different building heights within those districts, and hopefully we can make those decisions tonight. John?
Could you describe again how you propose dividing up the corridor?
Okay, so at the corridor district at 7th Street, that's where you're going to cut it in half, and then it will go basically where it is, but then on the west side, it will go roughly, down 11th, down in, and then back on 8th, so that it would encompass the Creamery, what I consider the Creamery district. So it's just a little change.
Can you outline or circle, just even with your cursor or something?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, so you said from 11th Street,
Yeah,
splitting it
it's
at
really
11th
just
Street?
one block, you're just going one block. So from 11th Street, I think, to N Street down, and then back on 8th Street.
So basically this
The
central
Creamery
area.
district, yeah, basically. And then cut it in half, so that I feel like the southern part of the corridor could maybe handle some larger structures as we get closer to Samoa Boulevard, but I feel like we need some smaller multifamily units in that area, and it's called for. So that's my reason. To me, that's always just been so glaringly wrong. But like I said, I don't have any other changes. Does anybody else have any other changes, or do you all disagree with my assessment?
I would say that I really like that idea because it'll keep intact the Creamery district, and I do like, as the plaza is in this particular neighborhood, the Creamery would be the same, the city center, and you would have everyone around it. I like the idea that they would be facing each other, kind of like a courtyard around it. So I guess my question would be is, after everyone talks, would we want to do a straw poll, or what would that look like?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Does anyone else have any changes that they would like to see within the districts?
This is sort of a question, and it's about the Beryl district boundaries. Is that current boundary right about where the coastal zone division is, or is the Beryl district, as it is in our draft, kind of split between coastal zone and not coastal zone? A little overlay maybe with the cursor would help.
Yeah, that's, the Beryl District is, I believe, entirely within the coastal zone, and that boundary kind of comes right along the upper edge here. There's the line jogs and does weird stuff here, but for the most part, it's within the coastal zone.
Okay, and what was the rationale of that little corner off to the west being part of the Gateway Hub rather than part of the Beryl District? What was was it because it's wetland and trees right now, or was it for some other reason?
The natural resources section? I'm sorry, which?
That's the old log pond.
It's the old log pond.
Yep.
So is it because of the wetlands and possible vegetation and trees and possible contamination? Or what was the rationale for putting that there?
Yeah, it's basically the log pond is a wetland, coastal wetland. And so the idea, and these lines are, they do need to be, slightly refined and I think that there's some area on the image here, Commissioner Mayor, that I'm pointing out on the screen that has, probably some other uses. And then up in here, there was an area of that log pond that wasn't captured. And so this line, does need to be modified a little bit. One of the things I'm thinking, this is a little bit ad hoc. I mean, the chair and I did discuss this concept of revisiting the boundary lines the other day, and I did just get an email. I'm going to see if I can pull up some of the attachments through the email that Fred sent, so you can see, because it sounds like that's what you're referencing is something that he sent to you. So I'll see if I can pull that up, but this might be a better discussion for more of a study session where we could sit around the table with the maps themselves and kind of draw on some some vellum and take a look at some of these ideas. It seems a little bit more like a town hall than a vote up, thumbs up, thumbs down on specific proposals. So I would just offer that, but let me see if I can pull this up real quick.
Well, we're just asking for one. I mean, that's what our job is, right?
I love the idea of receiving this email or somehow that then I could, on my own, go walk around those boundaries and, physically kind of truth it out. Because I can't figure out where we are looking at that map very well.
Yeah, it doesn't have the addresses on it.
Julie.
I emailed it to David. So, well, then that's going to kind of ruin my plans for tonight, David, because I was hoping that if we could figure out if these are the boundaries our districts we want, we were going to go back in and talk about the height within each district. So maybe we can talk about districts other than the one I'm proposing to change so that we can actually make some decisions tonight.
Or maybe we can schedule a study session if that's what we need to do, to have maps and sit around and draw on something to nail this down. But perhaps we don't have to derail a proposal about a discussion about building heights. We can discuss building heights pending any refinement of current gateway district boundaries.
It's the one in pink. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's the pink one.
Yeah, and there's like 6 images here or something, 5 or 6 images. So this is a little bit, of a challenge on the fly, but here's the first one I pulled up.
You only need that one for what I'm proposing.
This is your proposal?
Yeah, that's my proposal in pink. Thank you, Fred. I love pink. So the pink one's mine.
And if that could be emailed to all of us, we could study it up, right? I mean,
If you're looking for, a vote or a consensus here, if we can just say that we're revisiting some of the boundaries of the district map, and we can figure out a date for when we all want to do that, and when we'll have the materials and maps that we can specifically discuss and think about in advance. That would be very helpful.
Well, let's do that at our very next meeting then. So that's my proposal. And it sounds like no one else had any changes that they wanted.
I think that the change that I would propose is that none of these districts cross over between the coastal zone and not coastal zone, simply because the hoops that we will have to go through to get the Coastal Commission to approve every aspect of any change or any zoning change for anything that crosses over is going to compound the complications of implementing this thing. So I would love to see a map where no district crosses that coastal zone boundary, even if it means that we have more different kinds of districts.
Don't you have a map in there that talks about that?
We do, and we've also, and this has been, quite some time since we've looked at the local coastal program and how it relates to the Gateway area and the proposals there. But the strategy for the local coastal program, specifically in part because of just this issues that you've raised, Commissioner Mayer, is to have the coastal zone comprised of overlay zones that are mirror images, if you will, of those underlying zoning districts. And so we are able to, for instance, we have residential medium density zoning in the coastal zone, and we have it outside the coastal zone. What's happened historically is if you want to change something about the residential medium density district, you change it, and then that only affects the inland portions. It doesn't affect the coastal zone portions. And so we have to go through this long iterative process of getting those changes, and they might get modified again, and then we have to consider whether or not we want to change them back into the inland portions. Right. And so to avoid all of that, we're structuring it such that we have an underlying zoning, we have an underlying general plan that is applicable citywide, and then we have this overlay zones or combining zones, if you will, that reflect the coastal zoning districts that are a little bit more vague. They have a slightly larger box, and so that's how we're planning on handling it here. Instead of trying to split it up and end up with maybe 7 or 8 different zoning districts, is to have it mirrored.
I think the problem with doing it that way in this case is that if there's an issue that involves code that would happen a few blocks north of the coastal zone, but if we don't draw that line along that boundary, we're going to have to send that minuscule change through the Coastal Commission in order to get it approved. And we want to avoid that level of complication when we've already got 3 levels of overlays that we're going to be looking at for some of these sites to begin with.
I can bring some graphics that we've looked at previously to explain that in a little bit more detail, how that proposal works, because it's specifically designed, the local coastal program is specifically designed to avoid that issue. And
it is when we're just talking about the zoning code basic, but when we're already overlaying a form-based code for this district alone, it seems like we're buying into an undue level of complication if we have districts that cross that boundary within the gateway plan.
Okay, so the next thing that was going to be on the agenda was to talk about building heights in each district. Are we ready to talk about that? Again, nothing is written in stone. We just need to start making some decisions based on the knowledge that we have at the moment.
Would that include community benefits discussion at the same time, or how do you want to do it?
I think that community benefits, that needs to be a whole meeting. And I really liked what Jane Woodard was talking about ranking. And I think that it would be nice if we put that on the agenda for the next meeting or the meeting after, and we all come up, including the community, come up with our ranking of what's a community benefits and what's an amenity and how to rank them, and be really, strategic about how we do that. I know John got us off to a really good start, and Jane Woodard had sent something too I think just today, so not all of you would have gotten that. But I don't think we should talk about that tonight, because I think it's huge. I think it's going to take an entire meeting.
I just wanted to thank you, John. That was fun, and I really enjoyed it. I got out my colored pencils, and it was
To organize the discussion on building heights, again, I suggested the concept of imagining the conditions under which whatever the building height is that you feel like is most appropriate for each of the districts are true. So all those community amenities, all the form-based code requirements, et cetera, those are true. Given that, then what are the maximum building heights, and have that conversation, recognizing that it is a lot to digest at one time. And that allows you the ability to separate these conversations and recognize that you're going to come back to it. Again, also recognizing that you may say, well, I'm willing to accept building height X, under condition Y. And if the conversation around condition Y doesn't come to fruition, you might come back and say, well, I'm no longer satisfied with building height X. So again, as from the staff perspective, we would really like to have some, and I think the community would as well, some certainty around what it is that we're discussing in terms of the building heights for each of these different districts, so that we can move into those additional discussions, because those may change, the perspectives of various planning commissioners, council members, and the public. If they knew what they were dealing with. If someone says to themselves, I'm really interested in seeing, Arcata go no higher than 4 stories, and they knew that Arcata was considering, building heights of 6, they might say to themselves, well, the only condition that I would be, amenable to a 6-story building is if you asked for, some condition, and they could express that to you, and then we could have that conversation around that. All of those still need to be, feasible. At the end of the day, if again the Lamborghini, idea. If I want a Lamborghini, but I can't afford one, and so I drive a Toyota. And so they have to be cost feasible so that the developments can actually be built. But it allows us to have that conversation to start thinking about, well, what if buildings were this big? Then what needs to be true? Certainly you don't have to take it up in that manner, but I think that's effective way of trying to segregate these two issues and approach them in a stepwise fashion.
So could we do that, and with the lens that we may be changing boundaries with the Creamery District, because that kind of changes everything, but we could certainly deal with the, other than the corridor, we could do the hub, the neighborhood, and the barrel. Would that be a direction we could go in, at least to get this moving, get some decisions?
I think you could even do it with the existing districts. If in your mind, one of the conditions that would need to be true for, the future is that there was an additional district that was added, that can be a condition that you have a discussion about. Or if the purpose of that additional district was that it had some different feel, look, or purpose, and that translated into conditions in the form-based code, then at this point in the discussion, you might say, yeah, well, I'm amenable to, buildings of height X within this zone that I envision a new district in, assuming that these other factors are true. So I don't think that you should limit yourselves at this point unless you wish to.
So, so when we are, I just want to everybody keep in mind that this is not set in stone. You're not marrying this. We're just dating at the moment. So, I would like it, so if we could come to these conclusions, then we can start talking about the building forms, the building standards, the lower and upper setbacks. Then we can start really designing. So when you're getting ready to vote, just don't think of a big square, don't think of a big, 90-foot square. Remember, we're going to come back in and we're going to soften it, we're going to design it, we're going to make it our own. And then also, I would like it if you could not look at what Plan West put in here as far as height, and I want to hear what you think as a community member. Everybody's lived here forever, what height you would like to see, and not go by Plan West, what they put in.
David, is it possible to pull up the Berg drawing for anyone that might not have already seen it, as background for this, visual background for this discussion? If it's okay, would like to take a stab at making a proposal that we can discuss regarding building heights and see if we can see if everyone can vote on it. Notwithstanding the fact that we may want to revisit the boundaries of some of these districts and understanding that we have to clarify community benefits, I would like to propose that we use a tiered building height limit for the different districts. I think that drawing is very useful to the extent that it gets us thinking beyond a monolithic cube that would stick up into the sky. So taller buildings, by using form-based code, can look like this. Form-based code allows us to make sure that buildings that get built will have whatever architectural features, setbacks, stepbacks, trees, balconies, dormers, they can be made to look very different than just a cube. So just using that as a starting point, I would like to say that we allow for 7 stories in the Barrel District. I think people are having a really difficult time getting their brains around 8 stories. Let's just move to 7, that we allow for 6 stories in the corridor, 5 stories in the hub, and 4 stories in the gateway neighborhood. However, in these districts that are going to allow for higher building heights, we incorporate a process of ministerial review where, for example, in the Gateway Barrel District, if a building is going to be 6 or 7 stories, it comes back to the Planning Commission for ministerial review, and it provides for public input on that building. The public will have a chance to look at the plans and to decide and weigh in on whether or not those plans actually connect to the form-based code that we build. And if it's 4 stories, 5 stories in the Barrel District, then it's a by right process and they sail through. So only this review process would only kick in the districts, Barrel and Corridor, that have the highest buildings, and only on the highest 2 floors. But I think it would allow us to nail down some heights in these different districts and also assure the community that there's going to be an opportunity, if a bigger building is proposed, for the Planning Commission to get a look at it again, specific to the project, and for people to have a chance to weigh in on whether or not that building, if it's of the tallest allowable couple of stories, does comport with the form-based code and the features that we want. I think if I hope that comes across as and hits as a compromise that will sort of allow us to try to move this forward. I said 7 in the Barrel, 6 in the Corridor, 5 in the hub, and 4 in the neighborhood. So in the neighborhood, it's only going to allow 4 stories. There's no reason or necessity for review. All buildings would be by right. Putting that aside, let's not worry about changing boundaries, but specifically in the Corridor or Barrel, where you could have either a 7 or 6 story building, in the Barrel District, 7 or 6 story buildings would come back to us for a review, ministerial review. In the Corridor, a 6 or a 5 story building would come back to us. And I think that gives us a chance to put a sort of stick in the sand with building heights and assure the community that there'll be an opportunity to look at this again if in fact we do see buildings of those heights proposed in those specific districts.
Yeah, I think Scott's talking about discretionary review when it comes back to the Planning Commission. Ministerial review is over-the-counter review that doesn't require special consideration.
I think we can do ministerial review at the planning commission level. I don't think we have to do discretionary. One of the things that I don't want to see is projects that get killed with dozens of trips back to the planning commission. I think we could bring it back for ministerial review at the planning commission. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, the requirements for ministerial review is that no discretion is used in the evaluation of the review. And this is the direction that the state is moving more and more towards in terms of requiring jurisdictions to make their housing projects reviewable by objective standards. So those objective standards are intended to be interpreted and evaluated by everyone the same. The building code is an example of objective standards that are used to issue ministerial approvals. The building official has no discretion when they go out. If the nailing pattern, for example, is 6 inches on center, and they go out and they measure and it's 7 inches on center, then there's no discretion involved there. They fail that nailing pattern. Obviously, as Commissioner Barstow has pointed out, with design, it's a lot more complicated than just measuring the distance between nail heads. But the idea would be that we would move in a direction of ministerial review with various layers of, public notice and even, public hearing to evaluate that decision, where, a body of commissioners is evaluating and, discussing before the public the merits of a project and whether it comports with the form-based code or not. And if it does, then the Planning Commission approves it. And if it does not, then the Planning Commission does not approve it. And so that's totally legitimate. And again, the connection between this and this ministerial review and community benefits package is that the community benefits would be structured in the same way that conditions of approval are structured, as sort of the base level. And so when a project comes before the Planning Commission, it's approved through a discretionary review process. It's well within your right to find that the properties or the projects need to provide some form of public benefit, as long as there's a nexus and proportionality is what the legal standard is. And so some of the community benefits program will be similar. There'll be nexus and proportionality, nothing extravagant. Maybe one of those community benefits programs will be that they will pay, repair all the sidewalk in front of their building. Doesn't seem very glamorous, doesn't seem very exciting. It's pretty much, plain Jane, and we would expect it of any project. And so I think some people are saying, well, hey, that's not a community benefit. Every project has to do that. But it's the kind of community benefit that you would typically condition in a discretionary process. So if you're not having a discretionary process, you still want to ensure that projects are pulling their weight, providing their fair share of those kinds of community benefits. What the community benefits program does in addition, above and beyond that, is allows for a voluntary commitment of community benefits that go above proportionality or go beyond direct nexus. And so this is sort of the beauty of having a ministerial review where you evaluate based on community input that you've already received. This is what we want our community to look like. Evaluate it objectively. Yes, it comports with that, and then receive the community benefits packages to support those projects. What we proposed before, this is what you're proposing, Vice Chair Davies, is real similar to what staff has proposed before, and in fact having 3 different layers where small projects would be over-the-counter review. Slightly larger projects would still have a notice to the community and a waiting period before they were approved, but those would be approved at the staff level, either through a zoning administrator level review or at a staff level review. And then the largest projects would still come before the Planning Commission. The public would receive notice. Everyone would be able to evaluate the project and say, you'd even open public comment. And some people would say, I don't think this, comports with the form-based code because of X, Y, and Z. Others might say, I think it does comport with the form-based code because of A, B, and C. And then it would be to the decision makers to make that objective determination, at a hearing style approval. It wouldn't be a public hearing per se. It would be a ministerial approval in public. Those decisions could be appealed as well. So the lower decisions made at the staff level can be appealed to the planning commission. The planning commission decisions can be appealed to the city council. And so that's a perfectly legitimate structure for the approval process. If you move away from the ministerial review, even at any level, if you move away from that and you say, look, we want to have discretionary review, where we get to make the decisions about what those conditions of approval are going to be. 90% of those conditions of approval are going to be, again, just the basic, fix your sidewalks, and then 0% of those conditions of approval, 0%, none of them will be anything above and beyond proportionality and nexus, because you're not legally allowed to require through a discretionary approval process that someone go above and beyond those legal thresholds. So that's why it's structured this way. If you do reduce the building heights, as you recall, the community benefits program, the building heights are shown in different columns within the gateway area plan, allowing for up to a maximum of 8 stories. If you remove that, we would just remove that column from the table and then have fewer community benefits that are associated with that slightly smaller project.
I think Judith has a response, but just real quick. So we can have different community benefits per district?
You could, yeah. And in fact,
complicated?
you can. And in fact, there are going to be some recommendations for community benefits that are tied to site-specific community benefits. Again, going back to the image that we shared, this is the car wash parcel. And as you recall, there's a creek that's open on this corner of K, on the southeast corner. And then the creek on the northwest corner is in a culvert. One of the community benefits that this property can provide is daylighting this creek and a public egress through the parcel. And so what our architect has drawn in this in this rendering here is an example of how that creek could open up and create habitat corridor and a through traffic for pedestrians here.
Are we looking at 4 stories there or 5?
This particular one has 5 stories. 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5. This building has 5. These buildings have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a mix, and this is what the form-based code can do, recognizing that 6 stories is allowable in this district. One thing you can do with the form-based code is say, overall in this district, 6 stories is allowed under the current proposal. Having said that, because of the relationship of this parcel and the creek and what we're trying to do with the streetscape, we're going to limit this parcel within this district to 5 stories and with setbacks of X. And so you can be very nuanced with the with the form-based code. Again, adding that detail is going to be more time, money, and et cetera invested, but it can be done. And I think that there are going to be certain parcels that will find warrant that greater attention. I think the chair had brought up one earlier, ensuring that the design around the creamery building really emphasizes that building instead of detracts from it. I think everyone in the community wants to see that, and so we can require that through the form-based code. Having specific designs that do just that emphasize that, and we can get advice from our architects that can tell us design tools that can be used to accomplish that goal.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
Yeah, thank you, David, for explaining how a ministerial approval could incorporate public review of whether or not a particular project actually meets the standards of the code. And I think that was something that was really well explained in the form-based code webinar that most of us have seen, and I'd encourage anyone else to look at that again. I would also propose that any project that proposes to have standards loosened or heights increased over the base level with the use of the community benefits program be subject to planning commission consistency review. Not just the biggest projects, and realistically, it will only be the biggest projects that really are going to be using the benefits program to get something that they want. I'd also hope that when we talk about building heights, we're not merely talking about stories, but we're also talking about actual building heights, including rooftop mounted, and anything that adds to the bulk of the building or its possibility for shading or anything that you would see. So I think we need to talk not just about covered footage, but also total height involving solar panels, elevator shafts, HVAC facilities, and I know that state law has some stuff to say about whether you can do that or not, and how, and our code writers are going to need to take that into account. I don't think there's anyone in this room who has the legal savvy to know how to make sure that we get what we want there. That said, I think it's really important to remember that anything we're going to consider as a community benefit condition that would allow us to allow a building of a certain height really needs to be something that our basic land use code and building standards and other city rules don't already require citywide or in a particular area of the city. Seems like fixing sidewalks is one of those things that is required citywide. And so it would not be appropriate for a community benefits program.
Sidewalks are certainly required citywide. It's in the municipal code, but it's also something that's a pretty common condition of approval. Condition of approval oftentimes reiterate just so that the developer is aware, requirements that are already included elsewhere. And so, for example, it's a common requirement, you just approved one tonight, that the applicant pay city fees. So the project that you approved tonight has a standard condition of approval. And so those things we still feel are important to carry forward into these projects. If you want to classify them differently, that's fine. But they are, part of, and the sidewalk improvements is maybe not the best example. There are other good examples of common, conditions of approval that don't go much beyond, the run of the mill that I think would be important to ensure that they're included.
Right. Yeah. I think what we're talking about is things that would go along with our ability to imagine a building of a particular bulk, height, site coverage in particular locations, roughly using this district standard. And so I think it's really important for us to think in terms of things that we would need to see perhaps well above and beyond what we would hope for in the rest of the city. And to remember that in the general plan update and our zoning code update, which will help implement that, we're hopefully going to be upping the ante on some of the things that we expect for any large project, for any multi-unit residential development. I would support the idea of thinking about maximum structure heights in terms of a basic level and something that would require the use of community benefits programs. We don't necessarily have to say exactly which benefits those would be for a particular program right now, but you know, when you're asking to say what would the maximum height be in a particular location, it's kind of hard to say that until, you know, we've got some idea about, conditioned on what.
Well, that's why I was try to make a point of saying that, you know, as we gather more information, we can change our minds on things, because we don't have all the information that we need. And I wish that we would have said height instead of stories. But
Well,
we can
easily do that. It's, you know.
Do we want to revisit that right now, or is that something we want to come back and talk about? And I need to open this to the public. I'm sorry, right now?
I'd love to do that right now, and I'd also like to think in terms of square footage of the project, because that relates to bulk in a way that some of our less flexible ideas don't, like the floor area ratio doesn't really cover that sense of scale.
Well, I think we would talk about that when we talk about...
It's a separate issue, but... Right, but a skinny, tall building that's not going to cast a shadow on anyone is different than a massive, tall building that's going to block out, you know, everything south of 6th Street.
But it also depends on the step backs on that massive, tall building, right?
Right, and its orientation. So if we're talking about maximum, you know, I hope you're all going to keep all that in mind.
So I've got to open this to public comment, but do we want to can we decide quickly on height?
I would like to ask Scott a clarifying question real quick. The heights that you reported, I just don't recall. How do they really, I know Barrel used to be 8. What did corridor, is what you're proposing there a reduction on in the other neighborhoods besides the Barrel? 8, 7, okay.
As a step down 1 story from each, I believe.
1 story off of each.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, I was hoping that by knocking that down 1 story in each district, and by allowing for a process for further engagement with the community and the planning commission, that we could get to a stick in the sand as far as building heights that would allow us to move forward and allow staff to move forward, and that we can start fleshing some of the other portions around this out.
I think it's a good nudge. I have a small question for staff. On 4 stories in the neighborhood, I guess the neighborhood is presently zoned for 35 to 38 foot max or something, so 4 stories would be an increase. And then at 4 stories I guess I'm just not quite sure how at 4 stories they're included in the gateway kind of community benefits scenario.
I mean, I think an advantage, maybe even if there's almost 4 stories allowed now, under the gateway plan, it would be by right. So it would be a much easier process. So it wouldn't be apples to apples with a 4-story project. It would be much more expedited, I think.
I was just curious if there's any way that we could put this so that the public can see what we're looking at, because I don't know if it's going to mean bees.
Right there. Fred, can you see?
I'm talking about the Zoom public, I'm sorry. Not these, sorry.
Juan, can you put the display on the video? I'm sorry, your mic was off.
Oh, the height. So 7 stories. I always thought 7 stories was 80 feet. Is that pretty standard? Mm-hmm.
makes for a hard pitch for someone who wants to go in the highest tier and secure the provide the most community benefits and still provide 3 stories. But that's just the way that the code is drafted down. We can change it. It's in draft form. So here are the primary development standards in these districts. At the policy level, again, at the code level, you would get into a lot more detail. But this is typical for a general plan level. And then I also wanted to point out, since we're on this table, that this first base tier, it doesn't have the community benefits program. It requires a use permit process, so discretionary review, and the community benefits program are based on conditions of approval. So there's still an option for folks who don't want to take part in the vision within the Gateway Area Plan. There's a lot of diversity in this area. Some folks have single-family residences, and they might want to come in and add a second story or do some other a detached bedroom that doesn't comport with the standards. The city still wants to be able to have a way to allow them to use their property for those purposes. Have a design review type process that that does come to the commission, and the commission can say to everyone and the public, we recognize this doesn't comport with the form-based code, but we're making these decisions because of these findings. So there's still an escape valve here, but yeah, the maximum building height is in here. Certainly, if you want to take a second look at that and review those. And Commissioner Mayer's points that the maximum building height in the code could include mechanical equipment, aerials, those sorts of things. There are some challenges when it comes to trying to prohibit or include solar panels as part of your maximum height. But and to Commissioner Tagney's question about the the existing building elevations, sorry, just keep popping off. Most of the neighborhood has, either 45 feet in elevation in this area right here, some of it 45 feet in elevation here, so you could build a 4-story building, maybe a 5 if you could really squeeze it in. Some of the neighborhood has 38. This is the residential low zoning density over here. So the neighborhood has kind of the most diversity. For the most part, the district has 45 feet as an elevation. And then the industrial general, this darker purple area here, it actually starts at 45 feet, but it doesn't have a maximum. The maximum is whatever the review authority decides is the maximum. Because the idea being that you might have heavy pieces of equipment that, have alarms that are long.
So David, could somebody theoretically build on any of these lots and ignore all the community benefits and ignore all the form-based design, or once the neighborhood is included in the Gateway Area Plan, form-based design goes with every property except for, as you said, the residential is kind of a single-family homes are different. But if somebody wanted to build a 3 or 4-story building in the Gateway area, they're required to go along with the form-based design and all the code that goes along with this Gateway Plan. Is that correct?
Well, there is an out. If I named the single-family home as an example. You might have a small business, one of the auto shops. They want to add a bay onto their auto shop. I don't see any reason why the Planning Commission wouldn't find that compatible with the vision for Arcata, despite the fact that we have some alternative transportation elements to this, and we're really driving to build up the alternative transportation infrastructure. There's going to be a greater need for auto shops in the future, not a smaller need, because you'll have more people who, at least in the foreseeable future, will have vehicles, many of them. So that's another type of project that could follow that design review or planning commission discretionary review process to not have to follow the form-based code. You could also have someone come in who's like, yeah, I want to build a 7-story building. Totally down with it. But for whatever crazy reason, I want to go through a discretionary review process. I don't want to build according to your form-based code. I want to do my own thing. Then they would come in and they would present to the commission their ideas for their building, and you would review it like any other discretionary review process. So there's probably, several other, projects that won't really fit within, what we're suggesting here as, the easy button, the easy pathway. The idea is that we're trying to create a streamlined enough pathway through this planning effort that we're going through the design process right now with the community to really get these ideas on the table about what we want Arcata to look like, so that when someone comes in and they're willing to provide that to us, instead of putting them through the ringer for them to provide that to us, we actually welcome them and we say, yes, the community has spoken, this is what we want, please build it. In addition, what this effort will do for us as the the state is increasing its the number of housing laws that effectively eliminate jurisdictions' ability to regulate on anything other than objective standards. It provides us a framework to get those projects to conform to what our vision of our community is. And so that's kind of the idea behind the overall effort here. And if it works here, if we can I understand this is a traumatic process for the community right now. There's a lot of concern and consternation. We can get through this process and at the end of it look back and say, hey, we actually built something that works pretty well here. This is pretty well designed. We have a number of other opportunity zones that we can go into and and apply these same principles. So that's this is kind of the test case.
Judith?
Yeah, David, you said something that was a little bit confusing to me just now. You said someone could come in, say, I want to build a 7-story building, but I want to go through a discretionary review process. I thought that the streamlining facilitation is through the benefits program, but that the code is code. It's code. It just happens to be a form-based code. What you're explaining is something else. Did I misunderstand that?
No, you're spot on, and I think that if someone, this is almost an absurd example, but it is an example where if someone came in and they said, I don't like your form-based code, I want to propose something else. Still want to build something high density, I still want to do something mixed use, but I just don't like your designs, and I want to do something different. I don't want step backs, I want to go straight up. They could go through a discretionary review process and the Planning Commission could evaluate, does that still accomplish our goals? And it could be that on a given lot, it actually in fact does accomplish our goals. We didn't get down to the fine enough resolution to see that, hey, on this particular lot, step backs aren't required because of X, Y, and Z. The Commission could, in its discretion, decide at that point to approve the project anyway. What I think will be the case is that in most instances, if that does happen, the Commission is going to say, we've got a really strong set of design principles that we'd like you to follow here. You're suggesting something that doesn't comport with those. We're ready to deny your project. Are you sure you don't want to, come back again and come back with something we can support? It's just an example of how, I think that regardless of how much effort we put into design on the front end, there may be projects that come forward that are different. The community still wants to adopt and approve. We have a pathway that allows for that to happen. I think the vast majority of projects are going to select to come into the whatever the form-based code requirements are that we're proposing and go through that streamlined process so that they can go directly to building. Again, the idea here is that instead of putting effort and energy into public hearings and redesigns and notices and staffing and so on and so forth and consultants to draft environmental documents, they would be putting all of that money into our community through this community benefits program that go above and beyond. The ones that go above and beyond, I'll clarify, recognizing that we may create another bucket of requirements that heretofore have been called community benefits.
I am going to open this to public hearing and we can come back. I see people fading fast. I'm sorry?
Commissioner Scott Davies suggested stories from other people in response to your question. Do you want to hear from other commissioners about what they would suggest?
About the total capital
Building
authority.
height maximums.
Oh, do we have other proposals?
I have some ideas
Okay,
if
go
nobody
ahead.
else does. I don't know if any of the other commissioners do.
I like what Scott pitched. I'm pondering that.
I would suggest a maximum of 6 stories for the barrel, the corridor. I have no idea what's going on with the hub because those boundaries don't make a whole lot of sense to me. 4 stories for the neighborhood, and anything above 4 stories would have to provide very significant community benefits. I would eliminate that 3rd and 4th tier of benefits that are associated with 7 and 8 story buildings.
Can you explain further, Judith? So anything over, you're saying anything over 4 stories would not be by right?
And anything above 4 stories for ministerial approval under the form-based code and gateway area plan options would need to provide substantial community benefits linked to our community benefits program.
And have you thought about feasibility? Like,
obviously, a builder isn't going to propose anything that's not feasible. These are developer-initiated proposals, and basically anything that exceeds that, what is the 4 stories? Is it 45 feet, 50 feet?
45, wasn't it?
Anything that exceeds that will be subject to a community benefits program review. They're not prohibited from building in those zones up to 6 stories, but with significant community benefits provided and specified.
so I almost feel like we need a developer or two to come in and talk to us, because to me, I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, I can only build, if I'm a developer, I can only build 4 stories, and I have to provide all these expensive community benefits. Why would I go to Arcata to build? That's what I'm afraid of, because we have to attract developers here. But I might be wrong. I've never built a 4-story. I have no idea. So I almost want us to have a developer come in and talk to us about this and educate us so that we know what we're proposing.
Yeah, obviously some of those benefits are going to be more expensive than others. Developers will probably choose the cheaper ones or the ones for which they can receive other subsidies to cover the difference. And affordable housing clearly is going to lead that benefits package, and there are abundant subsidies that will be available to provide it. And we need to figure out what levels make sense, how much is worth how much to us, what types of subsidies a developer can double dip on and still have it count as a community benefit. We need to have those discussions. But I think that if we're going to engage in a community benefits program in exchange for, bigger buildings, we need to take seriously the point at which those requirements will kick in.
Do we have any developers that we could invite in, any experts or any that we can come in and talk to us about this, and then also talk to us about building height and what's real? I mean, after you put solar on top and do all the things that you have to do, and air conditioning, and I just want to know what's a realistic height.
Yeah, we can certainly invite some developers to come and speak with you. I think one of the conversations around this, or one of the points around this, is that there are certain developers that have a certain product they build, and they've already established in their models that nothing else is feasible. So you may hear that. We heard that certainly with the infill market study that we prepared prior to engaging this work, as a means of trying to do just what you're proposing, is to ensure that the proposals are feasible. And then in addition, the other point is that what's not feasible in today's market, or with today's building costs or labor costs, may be feasible in the future. And so I think what we're trying to do here is to balance the concept that we want to tell developers that this is what we would like to see. This is how we feel like we can best support our community. And again, if you'd watched the early August presentation that I made, I went through some analysis of the number of units that could be housed in 4 stories, 8 stories, and a mix of 4, 6, and 8 stories, and so on and so forth. And the unit difference is really very insignificant if you take into consideration the number of buildings that we would likely be to accept in that form-based code. And so if 8-story buildings were allowed in the Barrel District, I think it's important for us to recognize in advance that we're talking about 2 or 4 8-story buildings total. That's it. And so if you have 2 or 4 8-story buildings, that's not going to contribute significantly to the overall unit count in and of itself. And so it's really to the form-based code, to hone out those details. But if the Planning Commission said, look, we want to limit it to 4 stories throughout all of these districts, 4 stories, you can still hit the same number of units if that's what your objective is to prioritize units. What you're going to be giving up is open space and diversity of design, for starters. And so, so the relationship between, building height and the form-based code, I think, really is important for us to take into consideration. I think, as Commissioner Tagney pointed out the study session, once you start thinking about those additional, benefits that the community could get out of, higher density buildings that are going to have, higher rates of return, and the design elements that can be implemented to ameliorate those impacts, so you still get those benefits even though you're getting taller buildings. Once you transition to that type of thinking, what we saw in the results from your poll on those days is that the majority of you, there was sort of a block that stayed at 4, but the majority of you actually went up and said, now we're recognizing these higher buildings as potential. Dropping a story off the Barrel District, dropping 2 stories off the Barrel District is not going to significantly impact the number of units that you are able to produce. And in particular, if you're willing to accept, 10 6-story buildings instead of 2 8-story buildings, you'll wind up splitting the difference. And so I think that the idea here tonight, the idea was to get a recommendation so that the commission is real clear on the building heights that you're talking about, that you have a firm understanding of the conditions that would need to be true in order to accept those building heights, and have a follow-up discussion on what that is, that you have a recommendation to the city council with, that we're settled. We know, at least at this point, it's not adopted, but we know at this point the targets that we're working with, and that the community also knows. The community recognizes, okay, we're now working with, 7 stories, let's say, in the Barrel District, and then they can start focusing their attention on, if you're going to approve 7 stories in the Barrel District, this is what I think you need to do in order to make that true. And they can, we can discuss that through the design process. We can discuss that in terms of community benefits, limitations on the number of those buildings, so on and so forth. But if we keep having a discussion, I guess if the discussion stays in the preliminary stage and we don't get beyond that, and we keep waiting for new information, we're not going to have all the new information until, potentially, a decade from now, when we find out things that we didn't discuss today.
Well, we are discussing it, so we are making, we're doing it now. And so does anyone else have any proposals besides Scott and Judith? Christian? I guess not. Oh, John? Sorry.
This is not a different proposal. I just want to say that I like Scott's proposal and also Judith's suggestion, if I understood her correctly, that anything over 4 stories would require review by the Planning Commission in terms of the amenities provided.
Christian did unmute.
I would say, this is Christian, I would say Scott's idea is a good compromise. I'm still in support of, the original plan in regards of, providing the opportunity to the biggest bang for a buck and then letting things settle themselves out in regards of, the actual site conceptual development component of it. But if I'm going to compromise, I'm going to have to go with Vice Chair Davies' proposal.
So I think I'm getting rummy. I want to see if I could get clarification in the difference between what Vice Chair Davies and what Judith had. Sorry, Mayor.
So they had you're asking what the difference is?
Yeah. Sorry. If you could clarify how your proposal was different than Scott's.
Yeah, I think the crucial difference, other than the heights, the maximum heights of buildings, has to do with when a requirement for engaging with the community benefits program would kick in. And I think that by looking at the heights that are already maximums in that area and basically saying things that are above a certain height, and I'm using height rather than number of stories, because we are talking about the effects on the surrounding areas. At that point, significant community benefits would need to be part of the project. And I think the important thing to remember is that we're not necessarily specifying the cost of the benefits to the developer. The developer gets to decide that themselves. We're talking about the relative value of those benefits to our community. And that's how we need to weight them so that the benefits produce a result that the community can accept. The other thing that I would add to this that maybe is different, that I didn't mention at the beginning, but maybe in a written version I would, is to recognize that there may be buildings going up which are not subject to our regulatory program in particular neighborhoods. And I would provide some, I hate to use the word trigger for when we would need to adjust the total level of development in an area in response to that. And I guess the specific scenario I'm thinking of is Cal Poly decides to build 3 8-story buildings wherever at the upper edge of of what we're now calling the Barrel District. Do 3 additional developers get to go in and build a 7-story building right next to them? That's a scenario I think we need to address. And that's simply saying what our maximum height is will now not allow us to do.
do you have a recommendation in how we would address that ahead of time? Because that is huge. I mean, if we have everything set up and then Cal Poly just goes in and does it, then we could be with an entire, who knows how many 8-story buildings.
I don't think under state law, we know how that could work yet, because every time anyone has attempted to do something like that, one of the university systems or a developer takes them to court, and then the courts decide. So I think we need to, again, have a really, really smart code writer help us work on that in light of recent scenarios and court decisions and state laws.
Just to clarify, so for the code could be written, if this happened with Cal Poly Humboldt, then it would change things? Could we do that?
I don't know.
Can we?
I think there's just so many possible eventualities that we can't possibly list all of those right now.
That's a big one. I mean,
right. But if we have an opportunity as a planning commission to review these projects when they're in the higher stories, then that allows us some opportunity to come back and see these projects, given the facts on the ground, given the specific building proposal, given what's happened since with Cal Poly or other things. And it's a way to ensure that we have a chance to see these projects again in the higher stories. That's why I'm saying, let's just say, if they're bigger buildings, they come back to us. That way, there's an opportunity for some ministerial review there, and an opportunity for the public and the planning commission to weigh in. And it more broadly gives us an opportunity to address the things that we can't possibly foresee all of right now.
I'm sorry, I have to open the public hearing. These people are fading fast, and we can come back to this. Would you like to step up? Thank you. And please state your name.
And thanks for all the hard work and time everybody puts into this. And David, I don't know where we'd be without your help. But thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say, my name's Steve Geeter. I'm a resident, a business owner, and a community member here in Arcata. And I think the idea of the whole working group or task force, as it was called in different ways, I think we obviously need like groups like this to help vet out some of this stuff as we go along, and to continue the engagement that if there's like 3 meetings left with the city. And I think there probably needs to be a little more engagement from public after that, and some working groups, and people want to help and things like that. A lot of people don't really know about what's happening in the process. I think most people that I've talked to recently, other business owners, people in Arcata, although there's been time for them to be involved in stuff, I feel like many people are disconnected from the project and don't understand the potential large impacts on the community where our kids go to school and we walk our dogs and all the different things that people do. So I think, community engagement is obviously an important aspect to it, but the way I think it was like labeled as a task force, I don't know, maybe I misunderstood what was happening there, but I think that obviously we need those things, but everyone wants to keep the project moving forward. I would suggest, couldn't we just approve heights of 4 stories or 50 feet or lower through this process, the form-based code, and then just for all the districts, if something's above 4 stories or whatever it is, 50 feet or 56 feet with solar panels, whatever it happens to be, that those all go up for review, right, from the board, commission, or excuse my, if I don't know the exact different parties involved in approving the project's titles right now, sorry, but if something's over 4 feet, maybe then it just goes back to the board for approval. If it's over 50 feet, 4 stories. And I think like there's some calculation that you could use based on cubic feet to allow for some of that, the benefits gained from shorter buildings that are wider and versus instead of square feet, I think there's a way to use cubic feet as well in that calculation. Yeah, thanks for all that's happening here, but I think we want to see this stuff move forward, and I'm sure everyone in the community that's seeing what's happening, that's just trying to decipher whether it's 4 or 8 stories or whatever, could agree that 4 stories might be easily principally permitted or whatever, and something above that would have to go up for approval.
Thank you.
Hello, Chris Richards here. I'm not going to go back to my earlier comments completely out of context here. It would have been appropriate early on, but what I really wanted to just bring up with this process, and I know, Scott, you've compromised the developers' ability to maximize what they're trying to do if they would build by lowering, basically one down on all the different levels. And then Judith, you've done a similar thing, but with a little more thought behind what's the community going to get and all of that sort of thing. But I still think a big thing of what we're missing, I mean, we're all, you folks work real hard, you think about what you're doing, and you have your opinions and your ideals about what's happening. But the missing element is still public buy-in, and I'm not hearing people wanting tall buildings in this community. So, maybe they won't end up with as many free perks from these developers or whatever, but I think the community has spoken, and they're saying they would prefer to have lower building heights and, deal with these amenities on, like, this is a standard we're going to have for buildings in this community, and these are what we want, and then negotiation go on from that point. But if you continue to have this conversation and say, we want building heights this height, we're going to do this, let's agree to this, and then try to draw form-based codes around it, if you don't have the public buy-in with what you're doing, when you get to that point and you spend all that effort, you're going to have a big problem. And I personally never claim what building heights I think are appropriate and all of that, and that's not really my deal here. It's more, what is the community going to get behind with what you folks are going to come up with? And when you're having these conversations, be very careful that you don't forget about that, because, like I say, there'll be a consequence later. Maybe people will forget about it. I don't know, but I think it's an important thing to remember. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to line up too, you can feel free to stand up and.
Hello, it's James Becker. I do appreciate the deliberation considering the task force. I thought 6 were very thoughtful on it, and I'm glad that you're returning to that subject, and I think it's a good one. And I thought of something this morning, and just, it's probably a little adage I might continue with someday, but that the community will develop trust with the governing bodies when the governing bodies develop trust with the communities. And I think these task forces do represent, some really intelligent people in the community. I don't know where I went on that, but I can say I've learned a tremendous amount in this process from where I am now, and it, growing all the time on it. But moving on, David, could you possibly pull up the general land use plan designation within the gateway area, figure 4? Would that be all right? Thanks. Yeah, that's the one. So one thing it almost had this epiphany at night, but it's hard to see because it's all shading, there's very few streets. I think you can make out 11th Street and then work your way back, but I believe you're missing the mark on the neighborhood district, because the Devlin Cottages are a neighborhood. Not like 2 blocks over on 9th Street is the Devlin, what used to be considered the mansion. And there's a few houses in between, so I would highly recommend you consider moving. If you move down a little bit, I think you'll get closer. I would highly recommend that you consider moving that boundary, so you include that as part of the neighborhood. I mean, I know it'd be a little self-serving, but I think it'll be more accurate in this process. And then beyond that, with that in mind, I just would recommend commissioners consider the well, I'm not even going to go with this because I've changed my mind about this actually, but I will say I think that that's what I would recommend for a boundary change. It would be a good start. In addition, I would recommend structures no more than 5 stories throughout the remaining districts of the proposed gateway. And finally, I would recommend establishing a clear objective standards to minimize solar shading through the combination of siding, setbacks, step backs, relative to building heights and proximity to existing homes. I don't know how much time I have. And I did send out an email to you. It was a little rough on my feelings about the L Street corridor, but I really believe the best use of that corridor would be for a linear park. And I can support it with more things, and I've learned a lot from talking to a lot of people, and I hope maybe we can have a conversation about it. Thank you.
Gregory Daggett. I'll list one reason why you need help, this proposal, because a vast majority of you did not read that Coastal Commission report, I can tell. And the first thing that you need to realize that the city agreed to a specific task that the report asked for, and that was within 5 years you need to come back with a plan directly addressing sea level rise. So they're not messing around, and how this is related to the Gateway project is that basically their property that they have jurisdiction over in the Barrel District is a possible site for a future wastewater treatment plant, and that has to be in that report that the city has got a grant for $100,000 for. So you're not doing your you're not doing your job from the standpoint, if you're going to go ahead and approve for these buildings to be in the Barrel District before that task has even been done. So, I mean, I don't know what you guys are thinking. It's like there's an environmental impact report that needs to be done. There's this grant that has to be done, and they're not like saying you got a lot of time. They're saying 5 years to come up with this. And they're also saying you got 30 years to get your act together and address all of this. So what are you doing? It's not an issue of how many buildings, the height of the buildings in the Barrel District. It's an issue first that you don't even develop it until you get the answer to all those questions. So, I mean, I have to admit that sometimes I feel like I'm wrong on this, but I did spend some time from the standpoint that after saying that you guys were the professionals on this, that I looked at all the letters that were written, and there's a number of professors over at the university that have PhDs that have gone into a lot more detail than what I brought up here that are backing what I'm saying. So perhaps you should look back into those packages and at those professionals, because they are probably the best professionals that you have for the answers to these questions. And I'll tell you what, I'm getting tired of spending a lot of time researching and sending a lot of information to you guys, and I don't think you're very open-minded about this. You seem pretty determined with your vision that what you want to see, and, I'm not doing this for therapy for myself. I expect people to be open-minded and do due diligence as far as what this project needs to be addressed, and it's about the future of the city. If you're going to like blow it here without not even asking the right questions, there is not going to be a future, because we're going to have oh, never mind.
I have it. So I'm sorry, it's been a long night, and but this is our opportunity to tell you what we feel. So when we're talking about community engagements, I'm going to take us back a little ways to the 2-day open house on January 21st and 22nd. This was the largest event to date that the city held for the community to give their their input towards the Gateway Area Plan. We were invited to give our feedback with our comments on Post-its and stick dots on various posters with different content regarding the Gateway area. It's estimated that 170 people attended. The city did their own summary of this event and gave a very general overview of what the community's response was. But RGA broke down every poster, every comment, every Post-it, and every sticker in order to document and preserve every word of the community's members' voices. RGA gave a copy of that review to the community, a review of the community engagement posters to the planning commissioners a little while back. Hopefully you read it. If you haven't, or it was skipped, we can get you another copy, and I encourage you to read it again. In the beginning of that review, there is a chart of the responses I just handed out to you. That chart is specific to the preferred building heights. There were a total of 10 posters that had specific requests from the community about maximum stories. The total of these, so the total, and I think I gave you all my copies, so if I can get a copy back. So the totals were, so there was 5 people that wanted 2 stories, or 2-story maximum. There are 3, for 3 stories, there are 11 people. 4 stories, there are 87 people. For 5 stories, there were 1 person. For 6 stories, there are 2 people. And for it got cut off 8, so 7 stories were 0 and 8 stories were 0 people wanted 8 stories. So there's a need for an unbiased, scientific, independent poll before the Planning Commission and the City Council gives their recommendations for building heights. It really doesn't matter what I as an individual think, you as planning commissioners think, or the City Council members think. The community deserves to be this solid platform. This community deserve to be the solid platform which this plan is built upon. We all know what happens when we build on top of an uneven foundation. The Gateway Area Plan will never be stable or strong without the community's support. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Joanne McGarry, and my eyes are crossed, and I'm really kind of dazed a little bit, but I'm not a very good person in terms of detail and minutia, and I really appreciate some of those folks out here who are. I always pull back to a big picture, and what I've heard tonight, especially from David Loya and Commissioner Mayer, David talked about the state objective view in terms of numbers and mandates and things like that. The state is mandating. And then I hear concerns about the university, and it can do whatever it wants. And so one of the things I just want to toss out first is maybe this commission and the city staff and stuff should reach out to both the state, whatever authority it is that you would reach out to, and to the university, and basically say, look at, we, the people of the city of Arcata, we are concerned about the future of our community, both in terms of climate change, which I have addressed earlier today, and sea level rise, all those issues, climate refugees, things like that, but also, I can't even think straight, but we really need to tell them that we're special and unique in our community with what's happening in our physical environment, but also in the polytechnic, and these kind of cubbyhole ways that we're being asked to respond from the state and in conjunction with the university, I just think we need to let them know we need to do it our way. And whether it's height or number of people on a space, we just really need to get some experts in here to give us a big picture of the reality, the true reality of our tomorrow. And so, again, I want to stress that please get an expert in on sea level rise and climate change. Maybe get a geologic expert in on structural, the land underneath these tall buildings that are being proposed, and a developer. We need to kind of pull back and get kind of a combined picture of a lot of these things. I finally want to talk about equity, equality, and diversity. I know that there's a group here that's called Rga, and they have done a lot of hard work because they really care about what's going on. But I also want you to know that they don't allow everybody to participate with their group. So I'm really concerned about that. And when it comes to diversity and equality, we need to be really talking to other people in other parts of town and get that diversity and equity involved much more than it is. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Fred Wise. I'm going to be real quick. If you dislike, disagree, or would like to talk to me, I encourage people to contact me either by phone, by email, fred@arcata1.com, because I'm not going to be back. I got to be too quick to back up a lot of what I'm saying. Form-based code, you can deal with proximity to an existing tall building. Commissioner Tagney, at the study session, you said something I thought was great. When people don't understand what setbacks are on tall buildings, they don't understand it. We take a clue from the form-based code, which is based on what can be done rather than what we don't want. We choose what we do want as part of the form-based code. And illustrations. The next survey should be with illustrations, not text. It should have pictures. Okay? The Slido system that is being used, it was used at the form-based code presentation. It is not an adequate method of conducting a survey. A person can enter as many times as they want. I have proof of this. And I feel it's entirely improper to refer to it in any shape or form as it was done in the staff report. And as has been said, there hasn't been a single scientific survey. We've learned that the 3D modeling is not going to be complete. I'd like to see a build out of 500, 1,000, 2,000. Or if we can't do that, find out the cost of doing that. Similarly, David's referred to we're not going to have a Cadillac form-based code. Let's figure out what is the cost of having a Cadillac form-based code. What would be involved in that? At the joint study session, it was the first instance of a strong committee response from Transportation Safety. Dave Ryan, if you haven't seen what he said, go to arcata1.com. It's all there. The transcript is there and the video. It was a strong decision, and I felt it was overridden by the City Council. L Street, I have an article coming out tomorrow in Med River Union. I have a preview here. I'll give to you. The decision on L Street, whether it's going to be a park or a road, is a real fork in the road in this whole process because it's going to determine building height, orientation, massing, and setbacks of every property adjoining L Street, including the ones that will probably be developed first, Marigas and the Ag Sales Building. I also have a letter from Steve Railsbeck, which is in your packet, but I have it here for you to read. I think it's an excellent letter. Todd Tregenza gave his thing about the benefits of K Street couplet. He did not talk about the detriments. I have an article coming out about that. And I think it was also misleading in some of his pictures. I also give a strong objection to not breaking this agenda item up into at least 3 different areas, which would give more opportunity for public comment. I think that the courts have shown that this is improper. It's gone to court, it's lost. The title has to be significant. I have more, but that's my time. Thanks very much. And this is for everybody.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on the phone?
Yeah, we have a couple. Go ahead, Anthony.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony DeLuca, and I'll start by saying I respect all of the work that you guys are doing in the form-based codes and attempting to outline the possibilities. Though I want to point out something really obvious is almost every public commenter has said that the perspective of the community is there's a disconnect between the city council and the planning commissioners and the community. The community is not with you as far as your vision goes. Most of us don't appreciate the plan. Myself, as someone who has been here for 20 years and works with a lot of different businesses, I find morale to be low. People feel kind of hopeless, like you're going to do this to us no matter what we want. And so that is why you need a task force to act as a mediator, so that we can see your vision for what you see it as, and so that you can actually take in our comments. I think it's been mentioned that emails don't make it to the public record for months after they're sent to you. That's something that a task force could help with. I have a couple other things here written down. I would like to know how you plan on getting public participation, because up until this point, it has been very lacking. And so without that question being answered, I think it's very obvious that you need help. And I think that if you don't form a task force to act as a mediator for the Gateway Area Plan and the community, you risk your reputation, and you risk causing a problem where there's always going to be a disconnect and a divide in this community. We are strong. We respect our values, you know, the anti-franchise law, for example. How can we protect local businesses from population density issues? And that's just something that hasn't even been spoken about at all. The fact that the question of whether it's even safe to build these buildings also hasn't been answered. So we all want grant money to come, and it seems like your interest is getting that state grant money, so you want to expedite the process. But, you know, most of the community actually wouldn't mind if you slowed down. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Relina.
Howdy, howdy. Oh, what a nice night we've been having tonight. I just wanted to say thank you to Scott for proposing a very nice compromise with building heights. I'll just add, you know, I do have faith in our planning commission, you know, knowing a lot about what can be done and cannot be done, what's feasible and what's not. And so, you know, just pointing out that when you build a building, you can't really make it taller after the fact. And so I would just encourage the commission to think about the benefits of density, not to get dragged into the mire of maybe fear-based opinions of what tall buildings will do to our community, but rather we can, again, like another commenter said, form plans based on how we want to see our community, and that is a large benefit of form-based code. I just wanted to comment on a potential amenity that would be easy and address other future forward concepts as we go into different climate changes and self-reliance within our own community, but that would be community gardens in new buildings. I don't think this has to be associated with building height or anything like that, but essentially just thinking of an amenity that offers our community more self-reliance and an opportunity for community engagement. So thank you all, and have a good night. That's all.
All right, thanks, Relina. Go ahead, Jane.
Last but not least, you guys have stamina, and it's taxing mine a little bit, but let me suggest a couple of things in response. First of all, I'm glad you've basically said, please come back to us with a community, with another proposal of how this could be done. And by the way, we had a meeting last week with David Loya, Karen, Sarah, let's see, who am I missing? Julie, plus Chris, myself, and Scott, where we gave an alternative presentation of how this would work feasibly and easily through the Planning Commission. All right? And we had 3 options. Well, there were 4 options and we discounted 2, and we discounted the task force under the Planning Commission. Instead, we suggested that option 3 was the best. We have suggested that we would be happy to give that presentation to you at your next meeting. Obviously, we would provide it in advance for you to look at. We don't feel there's any need to slow down the process through this. It would be totally under your control. And you could, the whole idea is to bring to bear the technical expertise that the community has to bear, and if need be outside, bring in outside people on these questions that are of interest to you. You'd pick the questions, you'd pick the areas, and you'd pick who you want to have as consultant. And Karen has already said, and Sarah has basically said, we think this is a good idea for the Planning Commission to take this on. And Karen said, this is going to cost money. We're willing to supply the money needed to provide the community and provide the Planning Commission the support it needs. So we are looking forward to doing that presentation for you at the next, and we'll take all the comments that we got tonight into account in putting that together. But we're happy to come back with a new revised proposal that we think is very workable. And in terms of, man, you went through a lot tonight, and I like the concept of looking at the district. I don't see why you can't have amenities for anything over 3-story. Why 4-story? If you're going to have one area be 4-story, then you want to have some amenities, then set 3-story as your base instead of 4-story. I'm going to not continue because we're all very tired, and I think it makes more sense for us to write up our thoughts and get them to you in writing.
Thank you, Jane.
You can look at them beforehand.
Thank you,
and
Jane.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, we have a few more. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks. Good evening, Commissioner. This is Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. Regarding the building heights, as you all know, we support the heights that are proposed in the existing draft plan, and you've heard from me many times the reasons for that. I won't repeat that, but what I will say is that you hear from a lot of folks sort of claiming the mantle of the community and emphasizing the need for community plan. And I just would emphasize that if you lower building height, reduce densities, reduce the potential for walkability, reduce the potential for reduction, you will also lose buy-in from a large segment of the community. So I think that's important to remember. Also, I appreciate Vice Chair Davies' attempt at a compromise there. I would propose that you be a little bit cautious with ministerial review through the commission. I've seen that done and attempted, and I think it's very difficult for committees and commissions to sort of toe the line of ministerial review in a public hearing setting like that. So just a note of caution there. And also, as you know, we do not support the creation of a new task force or a new body. We do think that additional public outreach done in the manner that staff demonstrated earlier this year will come to you meetings and that type of outreach that actually has the potential to reach underrepresented groups for their input. So if you want to fund that or propose that kind of thing, we would support it, but we don't support the creation of an entirely new body. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hey guys, it's a late one. Okay, first off, I find it a little misleading to use the 3D modeling image where the car wash currently is. Using it to suggest that what we are getting there is what you get with a form-based code. That is not what we will see throughout the gateway. It represents the best case scenario for design, and I hope you commissioners understand that. Let's see. Also, Commissioner Tagney wanted to know what specifically a Citizens Advisory Committee provides for City Hall. I can sum it up in one word: trust. The folks in West Arcata and beyond have lost a good amount of trust in their local government. If you think you can move on without trust, have at it, man. But you do so at the risk of our own peril. This is not hyperbole. There's an undercurrent of discontent in this town that is leading us to a place we all don't want to be. So you can do what you can to develop trust, or you can fan the flames of discontent. That's your choice. I hope you make the right decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Greg, go ahead.
Hi, thanks once again. I want to second, if you will, the proposals and comments by Scott and RGA and by Aaron about trust. I do know there's a lot of consternation in the community about this program, and I think I want to step back. There are so many very important issues that will be dealt with down the line, but step back and kind of offer a macro analysis that it's odd to me that we're normalizing this glut of towers, living towers in a quadrant of the city that has had anything like this ever. And I just wanted to share with you, I'm in touch with reporters around the country. They occasionally contact me for North Coast stuff, and so there's a reporter that I correspond with very rarely, but we're on friendly terms, and this person is a Pulitzer Prize winning national reporter and knows this area. And so I sent along yesterday some of the material on this just to get an idea of what this reporter thought, and they wrote back, "It's quite stunning that this pearl on the coast would be subject to dramatic changes like that." And this is someone who visits here, who stays in our lodging and goes to the restaurants and loves the coast and the redwoods, and again is a Pulitzer Prize winning national reporter for a major newspaper, and understands what we've got here. And what I'm getting from David Loya, from Plan West, from supporters of this project, is that you don't understand what we've got here. I understand we need housing, and I support denser housing. I think that's important as well. But what you're talking about here is something that people who live in Alameda would fight, right? This is just weird to me that we're normalizing this idea of 7, 8-story towers in a quadrant of the city. And this is just the beginning of the GPU. And it far exceeds state mandates for housing. And I don't get it, except the college needs about 3,500 units, and the city is proposing about 3,500. And developers are making bank on owning rentals. And I get that part. So what I don't get is why our city officials aren't standing up to these pressures. You need to stand up. You need to protect us, as I said earlier. So that's my call to you. Don't succumb to this weird, abnormal idea that we can fill a quadrant of the city with 7- and 8-story buildings, and it's going to be okay, and not deal with the traffic at all, just to name one of dozens of massive impact. Thank you.
Thank you. 3493, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, thank you. Hi, this is Elizabeth Connor, and first I want to thank all the planning commissioners, each of you, for your time and dedication. As a former planning commissioner, I understand the amount of effort it takes, and I appreciate your attention to detail. I also want to thank you for tonight agreeing to centralize the process in the planning commission. That makes it a lot easier for those of us in the public to participate, just having the one process. And I agree with your decision to call in unbiased experts as needed, as we did on the General Plan 2020 Task Force. And so I appreciate you moving this forward in this way. I'm calling in tonight in support of the main parts of the Gateway Area Plan, and up to 7 to 8 stories, depending on the district, and assuming step back for any above 4 stories. I support the Gateway Area Plan because I want a mix of building types and sizes. I want open space to be in the area, and because I support infill because it's climate friendly and preserves our environment. Mostly I support this plan because we need more housing and we need it now. This isn't about mandates, it's about people and quality of life, and you need to have a home to have a decent quality of life. Right now, there's a shortage of, such an acute and urgent shortage. We need rental units, we need condos, and we need homes. Some of the results of this shortage have been that too many of our citizens are paying way too much of their income for rent, leading to less money on things like food and medical care, and it's showing. Number 2, the number of homeless people is increasing, as we all know, but so is the number of people living in their offices and workshops and garages. There's way too many people that that have moved to Arcata, from Arcata to McKinleyville and Eureka, and it's a significant number. And so the number of people that must own a car to get to their apartment from their school or workplace has increased, and so is the amount of CO2s. The lack of housing and affordable housing is leaving students, they're just desperate to find housing, and many of us young families are wondering if they will ever afford a home in our community and build assets. And also, the lack of housing and affordable housing in particular has seriously hurt several of our local institutions and companies like Wing Inflatables and Humboldt Open Door Clinics, who don't have the ability to hire the workers they want because they can't find housing and affordable housing. So further, I think affordable housing should not be a community benefit as in the current proposal. And I would encourage, given the need, I would encourage your commission to recommend to the city council a policy that requires that 25% of all units in any new buildings over 10 units be available to low or low moderate income. And obviously this comes with subsidies.
I'm sorry.
The last thing I'd like to say, that's fine.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, and we have one more caller. Go ahead, Thomas. Must have had technical difficulties. That caller dropped off.
Okay, so we're going to close the public comment section. I know everyone is really tired, so I'm going to wrap this up really quick. First off, Patricia, did you email this out to us? If you didn't, can you please? I just want to make a couple of things. So this is like a pet peeve of mine. I'm sorry if I'm grumpy. I'm going to try to be nice, but people keep calling this draft the original plan. This was never the original plan. It didn't have any community input. That's what we're doing now. And people have said, oh, approve the plan. This was never the plan. It's a template, and we're working on filling in the blanks and taking out what we want and putting in, that sort of thing. Civic Builders or Plan West did a great job in putting this together, but this was never the plan. that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. It's like, it was never the plan. It didn't have any community input. That's what we're doing now. Regarding the Barrel District. So all we're doing is zoning. The city is not going to create the housing that, and if it's not feasible for someone to come in and build in the Barrel District, like Greg was talking about, well, it won't happen. So then also what we do what's presented before us. We're appointed by the city council. We do what is presented to us. Yes, we have some leeway on how we're going to do it, but we just do what lands on our desk, basically. I just wanted to point those things out. I guess I'm getting grumpy. If anybody wants to throw in anything, but I'm going to end this, I promise. So at our next meeting, since we didn't really finish everything, although we did actually got somewhere, we need to come back with either our own proposals regarding height, or we need to come back with whose proposal we want to, or which proposal we want to approve. Keeping in mind that we can change our minds if more information comes to light. I think we need to at least start on the community benefits and amenity proposals, and I would invite the public and anybody that's interested or thinks they have any bright ideas, please email us well ahead of time so we can have time to really think about it over the next 2 weeks. And then we also want to finish up possibly my idea about changing a couple of districts. Somebody had another idea about putting the Devlin houses in the neighborhood district. So let's just look at some different things and we can vote on it. That should be probably the easiest thing we do at the next meeting. Does anyone want to add anything, or are we ready to go home?
I would like to add just that building heights and community benefits go together for me. I can't talk about one without the other. I am absolutely determined to see that community benefits be part of any discussion of larger buildings. The other thing is, when we get to correspondence and communications, I have one small item, so just don't end before that.
So, we are moving on to...
Chair, your mic is not on, just so you know.
We're moving on to correspondence and communications. Dan?
Would the city like to go first? It just to announce that there's a trail summit on September 24th, Saturday in Eureka at Sequoia Conference Center. It's open to the public. It's Trail Partners Fair, updates with local experts, and Senator Mike McGuire. You can go to, the Trails, Humboldt Trails Council if you have questions. That's all.
It hasn't been widely advertised, but there is a circus at Carlson Park, and it is sponsored by Arcata Playhouse. So go check it out. A circus. That's for Joanne Sheet. There you go.
Just a couple of quick things. I'd intended to give you a little bit more comprehensive update on Assembly Bill 2011, but given the late hour, I'll just mention that it has been moved on to the governor's desk. Assembly Bill 2011 was the bill that I reported out to the Planning Commission about a month ago that would allow for the development of affordable housing on any site where retail, commercial, or parking is a principally permitted activity. And I think I've described this as the anti-zoning law. And so that is now before the governor. And I can give you a bigger update to that at our next meeting. And then the other thing I wanted to let you know about is that on October 14th, the Institute of Local Government is going to provide a planning commissioner, and I believe this will be open to the city council members as well, but a sort of like a planning commissioner boot camp that you'll all be invited for. I just want you to know now so you can mark your calendars for October 14th.
That's through Zoom, right? I think I already have that in my calendar.
It is actually in person.
Oh, it's in person.
At a city facility. It'll be here in Arcata. Commissioners from across the county are welcome.
And it won't be virtual at all?
I can't speak to that, but I will get that information for you.
Okay. All right, anything else? If not, this meeting is adjourned.